Welcome to the Dixie Doggers podcast. We're here to share knowledge and heritage. We hope y'all enjoy. Southern Cross. It's the best cut gear in the business. We run it on our dogs. Hit up Dave Williams at Southern Cross Cut Gear. Go to www.hogdoggear.com. If you're looking for Brahma and Brahma Cross cattle, Marc Rankin with the Rankin Ranch 38 Cattle Company, he specializes in them. He is the man for the job. He's based out of Oglethorpe County, Georgia, and you can contact him at 407-832-2077.
If you're buying or selling land, farms, or hunting property, these folks know land. Phil Wilson with UC Hunting Properties, 678-791-3483.
You meant to do damage to her daughter, which was a dog as well, in the next kennel, and she hung her leg on the top, and her daughter killed her while she was hanging in the fence.
Oh, so, man.
That's that kind of stuff does happen.
Yeah, he got out yesterday, and I thought I might have left the gate open, but I went back and the gate was shut. And so his doghouse is in the corner. I said, well, he got on that doghouse or something. So I took the doghouse and I moved it to the center. And I was like, well, he can't get through there, or he can't get out like that. And I don't know if he actually jumped. I mean, he's a leggy dog, but he's still real young. And I don't know how in the world he done that. But you know how dogs are. They just
some of them escape Alcatraz, brother.
This rascal right here,
out, you just about to go hold.
Yeah, and this rascal here, all he wants to do is go bay a hog. I mean, right. He got out. My wife called me. She said, "Hey, I hear a dog down there at the pen." And I said, "Well, go down there and see which one. Make sure there ain't none of them down there trying to catch or nothing." I said, "If they're down there just barking," I said, "I'll be there in 30 minutes." I said, "It's not that big a deal." And she said, "No, it's one of them brindle puppies." And that rascal was down there just a hammered. I got home. I let him stay for another 30, 40 minutes. I mean, I think he's 7 months old. Maybe he can't be no more than 8. So I said, well, shoot, if he wants to do it that bad, let him do it. But he got to fighting today. So that was very good.
And I had a female named Oakley, and I'm telling you, she could escape Alcatraz. She'd either dig under, chew through, or climb over, unless you had her in a pen that was sure enough had a top on it and a concrete floor and wire hard enough she couldn't chew through it. But she started at 6 months old. She would escape her pen every day about 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and she'd hit the mountains behind the house there, and she'd bay hogs all night long and come back the next day at 6 months old. And we got, I knew she was going hunting, but we got to catch her on game cams out there catching shoats.
So you had some sure enough proof then, huh?
Oh yeah. She had a big motor from a very early age.
It's hard to get aggravated at a dog like that. Really, even or get mad at them. You can get aggravated at any of them, of course, but it's
right.
When they're that young and they want to do it that bad, because that's what we're breeding for. That's what we want.
Oh, right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a whole lot easier to slow them down than it is because you can't put no go to them.
Well, I tell everybody it's my hillbilly vernacular, but I tell them there's a few things that I tell them, and one of them is you got to teach your dog the difference and come here and sick them.
Yes.
And now the sick 'em part's not the problem with my dogs. The come here gets to be an issue every now and then, but I would rather have one that would go than that have one that I got to kick in the hind end to try to get to go, because if they ain't got it in them, you just about not gonna make it come out of them. So
yes, sir. Well, we had a really good response on the last episode that we done, and and I told you I wanted to do 2 of them anyway, or a couple of them. You just had you got so much knowledge and a lot of good stories, and just a lot of life experience, and that's the things that we need to be passed down to the next generations, and that way they can a lot of them, it gives them a little bit of they know if they're doing things if they're on the right path or not. A lot of times, a lot of guys, they second guess themselves and then they get unsure. And some of them, they're scared to ask anybody. And then some of the people they ask, people don't want to help them. So, I appreciate you coming back on here. I already got the record button going.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you this, Joey, everything I know, I learned from somebody else, or I learned it just out of sheer experience of doing something wrong and figuring out how to do it right, or might have been, lucky and done it right the first time. But, most of the good stuff I've got, I learned from old men, and I was God blessed to have a bunch of old men that I hunted with, even when I was a boy. I mean, I would go coon hunting and hog hunting and deer hunting with old men, back when I was just a kid, man, just such a wealth of knowledge, and you learn from that.
Yeah. I was lucky and had, both my grandpas and all those, my uncles and a lot of outlaws around like we were talking about last time. But,
oh, sure. Right.
But I learned so much. And I've noticed that this day and age, there's a lot of youngins, they don't have grandpas. not like our grandpas were.
Right.
Their granddads are too busy trying to be cool on Instagram or Facebook, and hey, ain't nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But where's the going out camping and, staying gone at deer camp all week long or 10 days or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Joey, when I was a kid, I went to school quite a bit there in Sheridan, Arkansas, and no kidding, they let out school for 2 weeks out of every year for deer season, because if they didn't let school out for deer season, there wouldn't have been nobody there.
Yep.
And they don't do that anymore, because there's, just not enough of the kids that would lay out that would cause them any trouble, But we used to go to deer camp, man. We went squirrel camp.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a pretty big deal too. We always enjoyed that. But that's a lot of the old ways is just not here anymore. Or, not in large degree anyway.
Yes, sir. People used to think I was telling them a story when I first moved here to Alabama, and I would tell them that we got out of school the first week of deer season, because it was 2 weeks, like you said, and then when my generation came along, they only let us out a week. And I hunted up there around Wheatley and Brinkley, around Dagmar.
Oh yeah.
I hunted up there at Homer Kennan Farms.
Uh-huh.
That's where we lived on the farm for a long time there. And we didn't have a big deer season, and you couldn't kill no bunch of deer. Not like it is here where I live at now. Here, deer season is, man, it lasts from October till February.
Oh, I know it. They just keep stretching it.
And Lord, you kill so many deer, like a feller could, I mean, I don't know. It's a lot.
Well, I've thought this. Let me back up just a little bit. That Wheatley, Arkansas just struck a chord in me. When I was a young man, I used to poach persimmon wood.
Oh, yeah.
And I sold it to the the True Temper Golf Club factory there in Wheatley, Arkansas.
Yes, sir.
I used to make some money. I had an old 51 Ford pickup, and I built me a bunk of a trailer at 14 years old, and I would.
Did you ever get cottonwood too?
No, never did cut cottonwood.
Daddy and them, they used to get cottonwood and take it up to Tennessee from Brinkley, and they'd go up there toward Dyersburg, Tennessee. I don't know what the deal was with that. Now, don't ask me. But I know they did receive a pretty hefty fine one time.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, I won't even go into the reason that it was poaching persimmon wood, but
yes. That's pretty funny.
But yeah. But you was talking about, that deer hunting over there and the deer camps and that kind of thing, brother. I mean, those old men just took us boys in and taught us things, but man, I tell you what, there was an old man when I was just a boy, and I've been a dog man since I started growing hair, and I'd even grab up old strays, anything I could find. I tried to make a hunt dog out of it, and so this gentleman was he was crippled. He had dove off the Hurricane Creek Bridge when he was a young man, broke his neck, and now he could walk with a walker just a little bit, but wasn't in a wheelchair a lot. His name was Rami McCool, and Rami loved the deer hunt, and he had old lemon spotted walker dogs, and anyway he had a car, and he would load his dogs in the back of that car, and he'd drive out, and he'd kick them dogs out, and then he would drive to another road and listen to where they was running, and he'd stop in the car and shoot them as they crossed the road down there,
Mm-hmm.
But he needed somebody to take care of his dogs, and he paid me $10 a month to feed his deer dogs. And then he gave me an old long Tom H&R shotgun, single shot shotgun.
Oh Lord!
Full choke, when I was just a boy, for feeding them dogs, and I've still got it today, brother.
That's pretty cool.
Well, yeah.
We'll be back after a quick break.
A quick thanks to supporters of the Dixie Doggers podcast: Southern Cross Cut Gear, UC Hunting Properties, Rankin Ranch 38 Cattle Company, Animal Housing Solutions, Boars N Broads, Ada Y Transport, Crockett Taxidermy and Processing.
I bet there's not a lot of youngins that know about them old long toms. Whoa.
Oh, brother, you could blow a squirrel in half with one of them things.
Yeah, them right there, they didn't really have no friends on the shoulder. They was not very gentle.
Well, when I married my wife, she wanted to go deer hunting with me, and I gave her that old long tom, and there was a pretty good old buck down there that I'd been hunting, and I knew where he was coming from, out of an old pin oak flat up into some honeysuckle thicket over there, and I put her in that. We was just freshly married, and I put her in that deer stand with that long tom, and I told her, I said, "Now face that direction right there. That buck will come from that direction." And he was a good buck. And back in the day when good bucks was hard to find, everybody high graded deer herd back in the days.
Mm-hmm.
And about everything everybody killed. If you killed an 8-point basket rack buck, you'd done something,
Yes.
But this one was sure enough a good old buck, and I wanted her to kill him, and I put a 3.5-inch triple alt buck in that old long tom.
Good night.
And she climbed down out of that deer stand, and I want to stand up from her, and I looked down, and she's gone. And I thought, what in the world? And where's she at? And about the time I hear that gun go off, and I thought, God, she fell out of that stand, shot. Could have shot herself. So I jumped out of my deer stand and run down there. She's picking up pine straw out of her hair because it blowed her plumb out of her back.
Lord have mercy.
And she didn't want to use the old long tom after that.
No, I agree. Yeah, those things right there they were mean when I was younger.
Right.
My granddad, he wound up getting me a little pump 410, little Mossberg, because my daddy bought me one of those old Jack Barrel 12 gauges. That was my first shotgun. I think I was like 7 or 8 years old, and he was like, he's here, shoot this. And, and hell, I couldn't even hold it up. And Pop, we were out there, and we were all, of course, back then, about every Sunday, or Saturday or Sunday evenings, we'd all go to my grandmother's, and they'd all sit around and drink cold beer and shoot 22s. They just sit out there and shoot 22 rifles. I mean, all evening long. You could buy a brick of shells for a little bit of nothing.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to be honest, like, everybody was a good marksman. Everybody could shoot open, iron sights. And man, we get out there and shoot. And I shot that shotgun, that thing kicked back up, busted my lip, had my head all swelled up, my eyes crying and squalling. And my granddad went and bought me that little gold trigger, Mossberg 410. Man, that thing right there. Man, that changed my whole world. I was a squirrel hunting, rabbit hunting fool then, boy.
Yeah.
That made it fun to hunt.
Oh, yeah. I tell you what, I went and bought me one of them little nylon 66s.
Oh, yeah.
And back then you could buy one at Western Auto for $125.
Oh, yeah.
And now, brother, open sights with them iron sights, I could shoot a gumball just as far as I could make it out. Yep. I mean, them, and I'd buy them 22 bullets by the brick, and
Yes, sir.
just shoot, you know, and of course it makes a marksman out of you. I tell people nowadays, even when I was working for Game and Fish, you know, I said, some people, you know, get talents from God and they can sing, and some people can play the guitar. And I said, you just don't want me shooting at you.
There you go. There you go. My uncle, he collects them nylons. He has got an immense collection. I didn't know I thought they just made the 66 in a couple.
Make a 11.
Oh yeah, they make a 10, 11, 12. They make them in a 24-inch barrel. They make the smooth bores. They got bolt actions. They got tube feed. They got the clip fed. I said, I like the 76, which is the little lever, the lever action one. That's probably one of my favorites. But he's got a really big collection. Them things right now are expensive.
Yes, I've heard that. Yeah, Lord help.
He's got one right now. Me and him were talking the other day, and he tells me all about it. And I don't know much about him anymore. I want to say it was a little over $15,000. Is what that was priced out on one of them sites, Gun America, Gun Broker or something.
Broker, yeah, probably. Yeah.
Him and another guy, they actually were. One guy was wanting to buy his, and the other guy had one that he wanted, and I think they wound up trading. But the trade value, the stickers on them was $15,000. I said, God Almighty, for a plastic 22.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what they were.
But now if
you ever took one of them things apart, you'd quite the engineer to get it put back together.
Yes, yeah, I imagine so. I've never messed with none of them. Which I mean, I don't hardly mess with anything. I bow hunt a little bit and then I stab the hogs. You know, that's about the extent of my life. But he has got a bunch of them very, very cheap, and some of them even for free that were taken apart because he can put them back together. He can take them apart and put them together. And I couldn't tell you how many people they've just brought them to him and said, "Here, you can have it." You know,
they get them apart.
We don't even want
them back together.
Yeah. Right. And most of the time it's missing a little, I hate to call it, it's some little spring in there. And he found somewhere he can order them things. He's got about like 5,000 of them. And he's always tinkering with, his name is Frank Wright, and they got the Remington Nylon group on Facebook. He's got so many. It's crazy how big of a following that those little things have. I remember, like you said, they was $100. They wasn't much.
Yes. Right. Well, a kid could afford to, you know, I started working. Of course, Lord help, brother. I worked my whole life. I was hauling pulpwood when I was too young to haul pulpwood. And I used to have that old Ford truck, and I had that old trailer, and I welded that thing up myself. And and I, of course, too young to even drive, and I'd pull that thing into the mill, and them old men just laugh. I'd have had a cord deal of pulpwood, and people nowadays don't even know what pulpwood is. You know?
Not many of them. They get tickled at the way I do my boys the same way. You know, I'm like, jump in the truck and go here, and they're like, Nathan was really young then. I think he was like 13 or 14. He said, "Daddy, I ain't got no driver's license." I said, "Well, you know how to drive." I said, "Don't do nothing crazy. Just ease down the back road," you know. And I got to thinking, I said, "Lord, I can't do this stuff not like when I was growing up."
Oh no, it's all changed now. I mean, it's a totally different world. You know, I was literally driving on a state highway with a standard shift old Barracuda, 64 Barracuda, with a 4-speed in it, and I couldn't reach the clutch and see over the dash at the same time, so I'd have to jump down there and shift that thing and jump up where I could see. You know.
Oh yeah.
And
well, you know, I think that's what's wrong with a lot of stuff going on in the world today, Mr. Raymond, is, you know, people like my generation, they wanted all of us to go to school, go to college, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. But it took the common sense out of the world, a lot of it.
Well, I think it took a lot of responsibility. I mean, really, because we were expected to be responsible.
Well, yeah.
And I mean, I got handed a gun when I was probably 7 years old. Mm-hmm. And I went to squirrel hunting, brother. And I mean, I hunted on the regular. And so, you know, I mean, it wasn't nothing to me. I'd come in from school, and now mind you, I started milking cows by myself. It was a full-time job. We had milk cows, and we didn't have them, you know, uptown fancy milking machine. We hand
Mhm.
milked, and I started milking twice a day at 7 years old. You
Yes,
know,
sir.
and I just never did get to quit working.
I, and
Just-
you
just-
probably you never will. Even if you had all the money in the world, somebody like yourself, you're going to work. That's all.
oh
That's all
yeah,
you know. That's
I
all you
I
know.
really love it. I mean, I'm always piddling and fixing things if I'm not out working outright. I've
Mhm.
always got some project going, and but that's just, I don't know. It's just the way we was raised, and we had some Mennonite neighbors at one time, and I used to just get so tickled. You'd see them little old boys out there no kidding, about 7, 8 years old on a big old International Harvester tractor, uh,
Mhm.
working in a field, and there ain't no daddy, no mama, nowhere. That kid's out there running that tractor, and
Yes.
they expect, and you don't hear that they fell off and got run over by the bush hog or
No.
got their leg cut. You don't hear that stuff because it don't happen,
No. You
because
pay
them little
attention.
buggers, yes, them little buggers was taught to be responsible, and they are. And nowadays we got 18-year-olds that's not responsible.
I know a bunch of them that are in their 20s and 30s that cannot. They wouldn't know how to drive. They wouldn't know that you had to push a button on a 48 Farmall C. They wouldn't know that. They don't
Well,
know.
I'll tell a little story on myself. It don't have a whole lot to do with hunting, but along the line of what we're talking about here. When I was 14, a buddy of mine lived up the hill, a mile or so up the road up there, and his daddy bought him a motorcycle. All right. Well, the old dirt bike, and so my cousin come to me, and there was a skidder up in the track of timber over there, the other side of this old house over there. It's 400 acres of pine timber over there, owned by Miss Payne, and they was select cutting it over there. And so Brian and Keith come down to me, and they said, "Hey," they said, "there's a skidder up there on Miss Payne's place, and we can't get it started, but we want to start that thing and have some tractor pull. So there's another up the power line where they're cutting another stretch of timber, and we're gonna hook them things together and have us a little tractor pull." And I knew my daddy, brother, and I knew, brother. Now, I feared him more than I feared the law, and I said, "No, I'm not going to be party to that, boys." I said, my daddy beat me to death. I ain't no way. And they said, "Well, look, if you don't want to drive them, if you just start the thing for us," which I knew. I grew up knowing how to do that stuff. And so I said, "Well, I tell you what." I finally succumbed, and I said, I'll start that skidder for you, but I ain't driving it." And so I went up there, and O'Brien rode his motorcycle up there, and I hot wired that skidder and started. Well, it was a black gentleman that owned that thing. And so anyway, them boys got on that skidder, and they take off, and it's got a blade and a grapple. It's an old John Deere skidder. And down through the timber they went with that thing, and they get into Flat Creek Bottom down there. But brother, you could stomp the ground here and see it shake over yonder. It was boggy. And them old skidder tires went shoop and slipped in that mud.
Oh man!
And I said, and I was down there off. I was riding. I wasn't on it, but I was there with them. I was on that motorcycle, and I told him, I said, "Hey, shut that down. You fix to stick that thing." But my cousin says, "Nah, you can't stick one of these things." Well, he stepped out of the seat onto the ground by the time he blocked that thing down.
Oh
We was
Lord!
about 3/4 mile from where he picked it up at. We never even made it up to that other skidder. Well, I knew, brother, I'm in bad trouble. I know. And so now, I'm just going to be honest with you. I told him, I said, we're going to have to tell this story. We better stick to it, because if you don't, I'm dead. And so the next day I get in from school, and I get a phone call from my cousin Keith, and he said, "The sheriff's been to our house, Ray," and he said, I had to tell him. And I thought, oh God, my dad's fixing to know. Well, I ain't much more than hung the phone up. Brian Reed calls. Same story. He said that the sheriff's been up here, and he kind of Andy Griffith the thing. The guy turned the skidder in for stolen. And the sheriff went up there, and he said, "I believe kids has done this." He said, "See these motorcycle tracks?" and that old black gentleman that he told the sheriff, he said, "Why, there ain't no kids can start that skidder." He said, "It takes 3 keys to start that skidder, and I got all 3 of them in my pocket." Well, Sheriff called my dad. My dad knew the sheriff. So he grabs me up. We go up to Essie's restaurant. I meet with the sheriff, my dad, and this black gentleman that owns the skidder and his crew. Well, I not only got a whip, and I mean a good one, but I had to pay out of my savings account that crew of men for a day's work.
Oh man!
And then he offered to work me for 2 weeks for free.
Oh yeah, there you go.
and so, buddy, that was the end of my days of doing something like that. But that old gentleman, he told the sheriff and my daddy, he said, "I just can't believe that boy knew how to start that skidder."
Mm-hmm.
And my dad says, "Well, that's probably my fault."
Yeah. But you know that right there, that whole scenario, that got you done and over with at one time. You didn't continue your life of crime.
No.
You wouldn't have hot wire stuff no more that it wasn't yours anyway.
No, sir.
And nowadays, if somebody got caught doing that, if some kids got caught, people would say, "Oh, well, they're just kids. Don't bother them." Or somebody get mad and say, "You ain't gonna, you ain't gonna talk like that to my son." My daddy would have been like yours. He would have been like, "Well, first I'm gonna whoop your butt, and then secondly, then you're gonna stay here and fix anything that was tore up, and then you're gonna work here for the rest of your life."
Oh man, that's what it was. And he asked that old guy, he said, "How many men's on your crew? How much do they make?" He told him, he said, "How long did it take you to get that skidder out and find it?" He said, "Well, it took us better than half the day to find it and the other half to get it out." Yep. So I had to pay, no kidding, I had to pay the entire crew for a day's work, and got my hind end tore it up, and then was offered to work for 2 weeks for free.
My goodness. But that's character. It builds character.
Oh, sure it does. But anyway, hey.
These stories like that. This is, I know we're all a dog hunting deal and all that, but that's part of Americana. That's part of our history and our heritage. I was raised a lot the same way, and that's something that's really people don't get to talk about. So I mean, you don't have to feel obligated to just say, "Okay, we ain't gonna talk about that. We'll go to dogs." But I really do appreciate you sharing that stuff with us. I enjoy it.
Well, I mean, it's part of what made me who I am. It's we grew up in the deep South, and brother, we had morals built into us.
Yes.
And if you had to, well, if I hadn't had the daddy that I had, son, I'd probably be wearing an orange suit, wearing a pair of slides today, getting a strappy suntan, or dead somewhere, because I was a hard-headed young man, brother.
Yes.
And it took a daddy with a firm hand to keep me in line. And if I hadn't had the dad I had, I'd have been been in trouble for sure.
That's right.
But I hope to think that I turned into a half decent individual. Well,
Sam, I'm sure you have, because I hadn't talked to anybody yet who said, "Hey, you got to watch out for old Raymond. You got to watch that. You got to watch that feller." I ain't had nobody tell me that. Now they probably told you that about me. I'm sure they probably.
Oh no, I ain't heard anything but good accolades about you.
Oh my goodness.
Nathan, I tell you what. Matter of fact, Larry Luhrmann, out of Oklahoma, was down there at Uncle Earl's, and I think y'all done a little video clip of them on Dog Trading Hill over there.
Yes, sir.
Or something. But now that Larry, he told me, both of you, he said, "Now them's good fellas." He said, I was impressed by both of them, and for Larry to say that, you got to be pretty good character. Larry, he's soft.
Yeah, we hit it off good. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good fella. I tell you what, and he's in with me in the dog business too now. I mean, Larry's he's right there with me, and we breed dogs and sell a few pups along the way. But Larry, boy, he hunts on the regular, and he's a dandy. I just love him to pieces.
Yeah, he's really good. I got one of them wolfhound crosses from him that he had, I guess it was last year.
I'll tell you where that dog come from.
You know the one I'm talking about, that yellow dog?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Hey, this is a small world, son, especially in the dog trading world.
Oh, okay.
That dog you got, do you still have him?
Yeah.
Okay. That dog come from Jerome McDaniel, the other side of Batesville, Arkansas. And Jerome got his start, from one guy he's around Gravity right now, and then some guys out of Oklahoma over there. But Jerome, and I think I mentioned it on the last podcast, but Jerome, he's got Catahoula dogs, and that's his first love. But he's got into these speed dogs, and he calls them his 65-mile-an-hour dogs. But he raises some lurchers, and what he'll do is he'll cross, a bulldog into one, and then maybe a plot hound, and he'll mix up some stuff. He'll have some Catahoulas, some plot, or some kind of hound, and a little bit. But they end up. He's got some dogs over there now that they started off with a Russian Boars female, and then he got into some Irish Wolfhounds, and he had some Greyhounds, but he's crossed all that stuff up, and now he's got some fuzzy dogs, that look like Wolfhounds, but they'll be leopard spotted. Some of them,
Really?
Some of them will be gray like a Wolfhound, but yeah, some of them got maybe an eighth of Catahoula in them, but just enough to keep that Merle genetic passing down. So he's actually got the Merle spotted, and he loves it now.
Well, that rascal I got out there, I'm telling you now, for a run and catch dog,
yeah,
he's almost too much to handle. He don't want to stay. He is fast as lightning. He's about 130 pounds right now, broad in the chest and deep in the chest. Hard bite. The first time we kicked him out, he was set down at 1.21 miles, and I'd never showed him nothing yet. I said, well, he's just running down the road. We got down there, and that son of a gun had blood from his nose to his tail. It looked like he'd got shot or something. I said, oh, God, what happened to him? And I figured, I said, he done got over on somebody's property.
He's done assassinated a hog.
He had a trail going down the side of the creek, and they done got in some shoats about 20, anywhere 15, 20, 25 pounds at the most. And that rascal had him a line of them. He done caught him, and he done left a trail of destruction for a mile. I said, well, boys, if he'll do that, I think he'll be all right. I think he'll make the team.
Well, I tell you what, Jerome has got, he's got a lot of land over, but he's got a 40-acre hog pen, and he's got some small 5 and 10-acre pens and stuff like that with them Russian hogs, and they're purebred Russians over there. So that dog you've got, I promise you, he's seen hogs before he ever got to Larry Lemon's.
Yes.
And then when you got him, he's been exposed. I'd say that.
He definitely. As far as I know, like I said, I didn't know if he messed with anything or not. He was still really young when I got him, pretty young, about a year old, a little over a year old.
Right. Yeah.
And but like he wants to hunt. He loves to run, so it works out pretty good. In these hills, he does better than I thought he would.
One thing that Jerome does with his dogs that the boys down in Texas and Oklahoma don't get to do with theirs, because a lot of them places is open prairie and places like that where they're kicking them one-off dogs down there. But Jerome hunts the Black River Bottom, White River Bottoms over there in eastern Arkansas, right along the Mississippi levee and all that. And them dogs has got to be intelligent enough not to run into trees and break their neck. That's right. That sounds, ridiculous, but that's a fact.
It is a fact. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because them dogs, I've been down south of Dallas, down around Ennis, Texas, down there, and them boys got them greyhounds down there that they run, and they're scarred up because they'll be doing, wide open and run into a barbed wire fence.
Oh yeah.
And just hang them. They'll have to cut them out of the fence. They'll be hung up, and these dogs that Jerome's raising, he's raised them in that timber and worked them from puppies in there, so they know how to navigate through that timber without. That's
good to know. That is. That really puts a whole lot more in perspective now, because I was like, and I didn't get to talk to Larry very much when we was down at Uncle Earl's, because I was going to ask him about it, like, hey, where'd this dog actually come from? How's it bred and all that? Because this is really something I was interested in. It's still a little bit big for what I like, but at the same time, I like everything else about it. So I can deal with a little bit bigger dog in a lot of areas, especially if he can handle these hills like he does.
Right.
So whatever Jerome's doing, he's doing a good job.
Well, Well, he is. He's a dog man through and through. I mean, drones. He's done topped over the 50-mile marker now. I used to call him a kid, and I can't hardly do that no more because he's getting up there in the age where he's getting into my class now. So.
Now, what'd you say his last name was again, Mr. Plummer?
McDaniel.
McDaniel. Okay.
Yeah, he's Lord, he's been into dogs since he was just sprout. I mean, he's had Catahoula dogs from the beginning, and would keep about anywhere from 30 head on down on Catahoula dogs at any given time. And me and him's bred back and forth for years in our dog lines, and a lot of his stuff is really, really close to what mine is, and mine, got some of his stuff in it. So, it's he's come over here and hunted those Ozark Mountains with me, and I went over and hunted them old bottoms with him. And I'll tell you stories. We was coming off he come over, and when I was working for Game and Fish, my captain called me one day, and they knew. I mean, I meet up with hog hunting, always have been. And he said, Plummer, he said, I need you to do me a favor. And when your captain calls you and wants a favor, yes is the answer. So I said, yeah, Luther, what do you need? He said, well, I've got 5 buddies that it's their life's dream to go hog hunting. And he said, I told him I knew a guy. And he said, I tell you what, he said, I'll even let you do it on the job. Well, now I'm getting paid to go hog hunting. Man, you can't beat that.
No.
Well, I'm hunting in the Buffalo National River over here, and now that's before they made it to WMA and tried to lock the dog hunters out. But anyway, that's rough old country over there. I mean, some of them old bluffs 200-300 foot tall.
Oh yeah,
and they're all up and down that river like that. And them old mountains, about the best way to get to the top of some of them is in a helicopter. And I told him, I said, me and old Kevin Lippy out of Blue Eye, and Kevin's a dandy of a fella. Matter of fact, Kevin raises and trains Kelpies and Border Collies, and he's probably one of the United States most winningest person in these events of training Border Collies and Kelpies, working sheep and that kind of stuff. He's an excellent dog man, and he used to hunt some of my dogs, and anyway, me and Kevin was hunting together a lot, and we had about 9 head of mules, and so we're going to take these guys. And I told Luther, now I'm trying to get all I can out of this hunt. I told him, I said, well, look, these guys are greenhorns, had never been on a mule, had never been sure enough in that rough country over there in hog hunting. He said, I told him, I said, so if I won't take them, I said, I'd rather take them two trips. I'll take 3 the first time, 2 the second time. That way I can get 2 hunts out of the thing. And he said, well, that's fine. So they show up over, we meet at the Compton Ridge over there. And now, if you go down from the top of Compton Ridge down the mountain to the south, you come into about 1,000 foot drop in elevation down there. You come to Hemmed In Holler. Well, Hemmed In Holler is the tallest waterfall between Appalachia and the Rockies, and it's a sight to see. It's beautiful. But anyway, so we're getting these mules out now. These are as broken mules as mules can be. But now I'm messing with these guys, and one of these guys was and I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but one of them was the police chief to the city of Johnson, which is between Fayetteville and Springdale, a little city. It incorporated inside there, and he's the police chief. Well, he weighed about 350 pounds, and they didn't tell me that. And he had a wooden leg from the knee down. And now we're going into some rough old country. And it took us 3 or 4 of us to get him on the mule up there on flat ground. Well, I'm giving these guys a mule riding lesson 101. I said, and I'm lying to them, messing with them. I said, now this one's name's Nitro, and he neck reins, and this is the way you neck rein, okay? And I said, this is Dynamite, and he plow lines, and this is how you plow line him. And I said, but here's what we're going to do. Jerome was with us, and Kevin Lippy, and me, and then these 3 guys. And one of them was a undercover DEA agent that had been in with the Hells Angels out in L.A., motorcycle rider, and then the other one was the Oklahoma State Taekwondo black belt champion. And I said, well, maybe 100 pounds ago. And so we get them on these mules, and now I even took them down the walking path because it was a better path, and it wasn't supposed to in the national park ride horses and mules on the walking paths, hiking paths, but it was a better, easier path for them guys to go down that elevation. And I told them, I said, now look, I'm gonna put Kevin in the front, and I said, you guys, these mules are gonna follow the mule ahead of them, and I said, leave slack in the rein and do not jerk that rein. Okay, that's really all you got to do, because the mule's going to follow the one ahead of you. And so as we're going down, we start down this mountain. And now again, I'm being probably meaner than I should have been. As we're going down the mountain, I'm in the rear, and the Taekwondo champion, his mule steps on a ledge rock that's got a weeping spring in it, and it's got a little moss on it, it's a little slick, and that mule's foot just slips about 6 inches, and it scared that old boy. Now we're on a down slope, cow face slope going down, and he yanks that mule's reins.
Oh, man.
And that mule stood straight up from that direction where he's going downhill so hard, and I was afraid he was going to come back over on the boy. And I'm hollering at him, turn the reins loose. And he did, and he rolled off backwards there like a big egg and landed on his head. And I thought, God, he broke his neck. And I let off my mule and run down there. And he had a rifle strapped across his shoulders. And I grabbed him up, and I said, man, are you all right? And he said, well, it hurt my pride more than anything. Well, I turned around, and Kevin says, well, Plummer, you might want to take that rifle from him. Maybe he can, move around a little better without that rifle on him. So I took his rifle. All right. I turned around and look, and old Peg Leg's off his mule. And now it took 3 or 4 of us to get him up on the mule on flat ground. Now we're on a downhill slide, and I turned around and looked, and I said, what in the world are you doing off that mule? And he said, I can't ride down this. I said, well, you doggone sure can't walk down it.
Yeah.
so I said, we're going to put you back on that mule, and you don't get off that mule again until we pay hogs. You need to take a leak, or we stop, eat lunch. I said, that's it. You're on the mule then. Okay, so we get him back on there, and we ride on down to the head of top of Hemden Holler. And when we get there, if you probably never been there, but if you've ever been there, them bluffs are like 200-300 foot tall on both sides, and they run all the way down to the Buffalo. And Jerome McDaniel, he's from eastern Arkansas there, the other side of Lakeville, over the side of Charlotte, oil trough over there. And anyway, he says, Jerome looks off of that, and he goes, my God, Plummer, it must be 2,000 feet to the bottom of that. And he said, if this is the only place I had to hunt, he said, I believe I just quit. well, old Peg Leg, he says, I've gone far enough, boys. He said, I'm just going to get off my mule right here, and I'll make me a little campfire, and I'll be here when you come back. He said, I've seen all the beauty I need to see. I'm good. And well, we had dogs bait in the bottom of Hemden. I had dogs bait on the mountain to the left, and I had dogs bait on the mountain. They split bait 3 ways. And so the guy from the Hell's Angel guy and the Taekwondo champion, they're wanting to go down into the bottom of Hemden. Well, brother, I am not taking 2 greenhorns down that bluff. I'm just not going to do it. I said, look, guys, y'all stay right here with Kevin. And I said, Kevin, take them, go to the left and follow the trail and come down to the Buffalo, come back in Hemden. And I said, me and Jerome go down this bluff, and you take our mules. He did. He put them in the regalia behind him there. He's alone. And I said, me and Jerome find a way down that bluff and kill that hog. And then I said, then we'll get the one on the left. And I said, you boys get to kill one of these hogs on top of the mountain here. That way you can get you a hog. Well, they was pretty sour that I wouldn't let them go on the mountain. Well, so Kevin and Jerome head off down, trying to find a way down the bluff. All right. And Kevin is pulling archery about his, and he's got these 2 guys behind him. And so they take off, and me and Jerome get down there, and we caught the hog and killed it. And we're sitting down there waiting, and I said, something's wrong. And he said, it's what do you think? I said, well, Kevin should have been here by now. It don't take that long to ride. It's been 45 minutes. So And he said, I said, don't take that long to ride down that mountain. It get back up in the solid like that. And I said, something. Well, about an hour, here comes Kevin, right up the holler for me. And he said, Plummer, we got trouble. And I said, oh no. I said, where are they? And he said, I don't know. I lost them.
Oh,
and I said, you lost them? What do you mean you lost them? He said, well, I knew you was waiting on me. And he said, I'm riding along. He said, I couldn't have been going too fast. He said, I'm pulling 2 mules behind me. He said, I looked back and they're gone. And he said, it was good open trail. And he said, I waited about 5 minutes. And they come riding up. Well, when I seen them come riding up, I moved the mule. Come on, here we go. He said, rode off again. He said, a little bit. I looked back and they off again. He said, I stopped. They did about 10 minutes. They showed up. Well, he said, then I took off again. He said, go on a little ways further and stop. And they wasn't there. He said, I waited about 30 minutes. He said, I knew you was waiting on me down there. And he said, I thought, well, God, they had to turn around and back. And so I didn't know what to do. So I just come on to you. Well, I said, well, you go back the trail. Like we tied the hog. I said, go back the trail, take this back up the top of the end. Me and Jerome's going up this mountain right here to kill this hog up here. And I said, we'll see you around when we come around to go to the other mountain. Well, we go up there now. We was kissing our knees, pulling saplings, trying to get up this mountain.
Good night.
And we get to the top of this thing, and our legs is trembling. I mean, we've climbed. It's almost impossible, but possible to get up there. We get there, and they got a boar hog bait, and he breaks and he runs straight at that bluff that go off. And I've seen many a hog just kamikaze off them bluffs and die.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, see you later. Well, somehow the hog stopped. He throwed rocks off the bluff, but he made a hard left, and down that bluff line he went. And I caught the dogs, and I said, hey, see you later. That's gone. Well, while we're standing there, we're listening to the dog playing on the other side. And I hear, bam, bam. So I said, well, don't have to go to that one. I said, somebody just shot that one. So we come back around the top of the hemmed in there, and we meet William Jeff the Lyons and a buddy of his. He said, Plummer, we seen your dog bait up there on that mountain over there, and we killed your hog for you. And I said, well, I appreciate it. Just saved us having to go up there and do it. And so we're looking around, and we ain't found them old boys. And I asked old Peg Leg, I said, have you seen them other guys? He said, no, sir, they never come by here. And I thought, oh, Lord. So we ride back to the top. Now, we started at daylight going down there. By the time we get through all this and get back to the top of where the horse trailers was, or the horse trailer, it's nearly dark. And they ain't showed up yet. Now, this is big country over there, and I'm thinking we have lost these guys that don't know anything about being in the woods by themselves, and these old mountains and these bluffs, and just anything could happen, And so I'm sitting there in the truck, and I've got my cowboy hat pulled down low, and I knew, of course, I was game board. I knew most of the park rangers over there, but these park rangers are transient. They'll come in and they're just there long enough to be at another job where they make more money and they move on out. So it's always a new wave of them and a lot of young ones. And so this park ranger comes pulling up, and he looks across at me and rolls his window down. I roll mine down. He said, are you Plummer? I said, I am. I said, where are they? He said, well, you ain't going to believe it. He said, I found them 12 and a half miles from here as the crow flies, riding due southeast. He said, if I hadn't stopped them, we'd have picked them up in Little Rock. He said they had crossed the Buffalo River, and they went through a camp down there that you wasn't supposed to have guns in. He said, them guys was armed to the teeth, and I wrote them a bunch of tickets for having guns, loaded in the campsites. And he said, they started squawking, we're hunting with a game warden. We're hunting with a game warden. well, my sergeant was from Newton County down there, and he calls the National Park Service and says, that's got to be Plummer. He said, tear them tickets up. So they tore the tickets up and come around and found me. And I had to drive 25 miles around over there to pick these guys up. And needless to say, the other two guys never did get to go.
The life of a hog hunting guide in the Ozarks. My word.
Oh, Lord.
You know that a lot of people, they don't think about how rough that country is when you say Arkansas.
Right.
You know, at least most of the people I've talked to now, you know, there's a lot of cowboys that they know what the Ozarks are, and they know what, you know, Northwest Arkansas is,
Right.
Northern Arkansas. But a lot of people I've talked to, they're like, oh yeah, it's all just, you know, rice fields and swamps. I was like, no, not really. You know, it's not. We went down to South Alabama this past weekend, and we got a little bit of surprise ourselves. We got down there, and the country, like, we go through a big spot. Usually we get just right south of Birmingham, everything kind of flattens out.
Uh-huh.
There's a few little rolling hills, it's, you know, the foothills of the Appalachians Mountains, but it's not much. And we got down there. It was right off the Alabama River. And usually, like I said, it's synonymous with, you know, river bottom, swamplands and all that. But everything, now it wasn't real big country, but there was a lot of hills that was, you know, 300 or 400 feet tall. A lot of bluffs, 100 foot, you know, 50 to 100 foot bluffs. I was like, man, this is about like hunting here at the house, you know, which here at the house, it's a little bit more than that, but we got a lot of elevation changes usually run about 600 to 700 feet. It's not horrible, but it's enough, like you said, it'll make your knees shake at the end of the day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You know, I've had guys, I've taken guys from out in the Rockies, elk guides and bear guides and stuff from the Rockies come out and go hunting with me. And they get out here in the Ozarks and they said, we thought you said these was mountains. These ain't even good foothills. Well, I said, no, sir, they're not. And I just let it go. Mm-hmm. Well, by the end of the day, they said they'll be with their legs shaking, knees shaking, cramps, and that kind of stuff. And they're saying, you know, a cow face slope is a cow face slope. It don't matter if it's in the Rockies.
That's exactly right. I think the difference is me and my son Nate were talking about it a while back. And like you get up North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, you know, the further you go up north, the bigger the mountains are.
Right.
Well, here we have a lot of ridges, and we have a lot of them, and they're very close together. So instead of climbing up 4,000 feet, you go down 600, up 600, down 600, up 600, and you do that nonstop.
Oh yeah.
You know, and I bet it's more similar like that where y'all live. It's, you know, it's bigger country, but it's not as big as like you said, way out there in the Rockies, but you got to go up and down way more often.
Well, you know, there's the biggest area of tall mountains in Arkansas now. Now there's a lot of like what you're talking about, where you'll go up 600 and down 600. You go over the Piney Wilderness, and that place, the way it lays out, is a lot of fellas lose orientation. Matter of fact, I've often said that the military needs to take their soldiers in there and do land math.
Yes, sir.
Because it really tests their ability to find, you know, their way in and out of somewhere. Mm-hmm. Because you liable to cross 2 mountains going in and cross 5 coming back out.
Exactly. That's a fact. Yes.
And but probably the biggest place is down around Deer and Zinc, Arkansas, down in there where they call it the Grand Canyon of Arkansas. And you liable to be 20 miles from mountaintop to mountaintop over there, and they're pretty tall, you know. And
yes,
and we took old Roger Atkinson from the National Park Service. He's an enforcement ranger. I think he's retired now, but enforcement ranger from the National Park Service. He called me one day and he said, Plummer, I need some help. And I said, what you got going on, Roger? And he said, they brought 2 pot loads of hogs up out of Texas. And he said, I got a report. He said, them big trucks pulled up there on top of the mountain and dumped 2 full pot loads of them wild hogs out of Texas up there on the park. He said, if we don't get up there and get them, he said, we'll never get them off. And what he didn't tell me was I wasn't his first call. And I kind of gigged him about that later. But he had called Darren Reynolds in Jamesbury and Jesse Reynolds out of south of Huntsville down there over there, and they had a yellow black mountain Jip. And she's a hog cook now. She was. They called her Fish Hook. And all the old Jip cared for was being a hog, and she was good at it. And they went in there and killed one hog. Well, I know them boys, and they probably done that with intent and purpose. and it kind of made old Roger mad. He called me the next day, and so we get there, and I told him, I said, I'll be down there about daylight. And I had took J.C. Davis out of Lampe, Missouri, with me, and Roger's oldest boy, which was out of the Army, and I took a state trooper with me named Chad Hips. Well, Chad's probably 6'4". By the time he straps his smoky and his boots on, he looks like he's 7 foot tall, and he kind of enjoys being taller than everybody else. Well, he had been after me wanting to go, and I said, well, this is your chance, Chad, let's go. Well, he wanted to bring his wheelers. He just bought him a brand new wheeler, and I said, Chad, you can't use your wheelers up here. I said, you might go 100 yards on one, but that's going to be about it. He said, well, I'd like to bring it and try. And I said, okay. So he brought his wheeler. And sure enough, we got there about daylight, and I'm collaring dogs and stuff off the tailgate there, and Roger's standing there. And I had that old blue boy dog, and I collared him up and dropped him off the tailgate. And he run over just dusky, just breaking daylight. He run over about 35 yards and just yaw, 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 yaw. And Roger says, what's that dog doing? I said, he's treating a squirrel, Roger. And he said, of course, he'd been through what he was going through with Darren and them the other day, And he said, God, he said, we ain't going to bring no hogs today. I said, oh, Roger, if we're hogs here today, we'll bring hogs. I said, get out from there, Blue Boy, let's go. Now, the difference is if I'd have walked over and popped that squirrel out on that dog, he'd have popped the next one like popcorn.
Yeah.
Because he didn't know that was a game we was playing. But when I told him to get down, he knew we wasn't squirrel hunting that day. So he comes off that tree. Well, I still had that plot hound, that branded bred plot hound that I had, and called him Arkansas Thunder Bill. I collared him, and I'd let him off the tailgate, and he run down there just a little ways and jumped a big old boar bear and crossed the road going the other direction into the other holler, away from where we was going to, hog hunt. And Roger said, you could shock that old hound. It didn't do no good. He was a hard-headed rascal, but I mean, if he'd just push on through it. And it was, like I said, about 20 miles over to another mountain. And Roger says, Plummer, what are we going to do about that dog? And he said, there ain't no roads in there. I said, Roger, we're going to let him run that bear until he trees him. And then I said, we'll worry about him later. I said, right now we're going hog hunting. So I called the Catahoulas dogs, and off the mountain we went. Well, we went about 100 yards, and old Chad had to get off his wheeler because we had to go down the chain bluff. And we started walking. Well, we made and caught 30-something head of hogs that day, and Roger couldn't have been more thrilled. And about midday, I'd caught, there was a bunch of pigs that I had, and that boy Rogers, he throwed his 22 up and was, he's shooting them pigs, and I just grabbed his gun barrel and throwed it down. He said, what? I said, what are you doing, boy? He said, I'm killing them pigs. And I said, no, sir. I said, I'm fixing to catch them pigs. And I run out there and caught them. And I had an extra pair of breeches in my backpack. And I take that back. I was wearing coveralls and had my blue jeans on. And I shook my blue jeans, tied knots in both the legs, and I filled them breeches up with pigs and sucked my belt up and had all them pigs in there. Well, old Chad the trooper, he's looking at me kind of puppy-eyed over there, and I said, Chad, do you want one of these pigs? And he said, oh, Plummer. He said, I got a barn, a perfect place for one of them pigs. And I said, well, here, I just handed him a little boar pig, and he named him Bob, okay, Bob the pig. So he's petting on this pig, and that little dude bit him, and he's got blood coming out his fingers. He said, God almighty, he's biting me. I said, well, son, he's not tame. well, after a little bit, he's picking off his pig something, and he's throwing it down. He's picking it. He's got it wrapped up in his coat there, his hunt coat. And he said, Plummer, he said, what are these little spider-looking things on this pig? I said, well, Chad, that's hog glass. And he goes, oh, my God. He said, you could have told me before I wrapped him up in my hunt coat.
Oh, my goodness.
I said, Chad, it's hog glass. It's like a tick more than it is a head lice. It's like head lice. And, but anyway, we went to about midday, and we run a big old sounder up next to Cow Creek down there, and And I told him, well, boys, of course, we were supposed to kill them. We wasn't supposed to let them go. So I told him, oh, boys, I'd raise your rifle and I count. You pick you a hog and try not to be shooting one your neighbor shooting, and let's see how many we can drop. And we killed a sack full of them down there. And so we gutted them and drug them over into Cow Creek. Well, about noon, old Chad turns around, and the trooper and throws his backpack against the sloping mountain there. And he said, and he wasn't kidding. He done got locked up in cramps. And he said, Plummer, call the National Guard, get a GPS coordinate on me, and have them come get me. I'm done. I can't go no more. I can't. I said, get up from there, boy. You'll be fine. He said, I'm telling you. He said, I thought I was in shape. He said, I got to thinking. He said, when I pull somebody over in my cruiser, he said, the most exercise I get is walking up to their car and back. And he said, and about half the time, I'll just wave them on back. And so I said, get on it. Well, he did. Oh, I feel so sorry for him. He made it out of there. But we put in at daylight. And when we climbed back out of that mountain back to the top, it was 10:30 that night.
Good Lord.
All right. Well, we killed all them hogs down on that creek. And old Roger Atkinson was at the top waiting on us. And he had killed Thor off my dog himself and brought them back out aside from us. And so anyway, he's just grinning like a Cheshire cat. He's happy. And I said, well, Roger, we got a stack full of meat down there, and I ain't leaving it. He said, well, where's it at, Plummer? And I said, it was about 4 miles right through there. He said, 4 miles? I said, yes, sir, it's 4 miles. Every step 4 miles right through there. So he gets a topo map, lays it on the hood of the truck. He said, show me where you're at. I said, right there. He said, by God, he said, that's 4 miles. And he said, he said, I tell you what, we can go through Johnson County. It's about 25 miles around there. And we can, come up through, there's an old hippie down there. Did I tell you this the other day?
No, sir.
Okay.
I don't
well, so. Anyway, so he said, there's no hippie down there in Johnson County. He said, and I wrote him tickets for growing marijuana last year. And on the park. And he said, if we can go across him, he said, it's about a quarter mile to Cow Creek right there from his place. And we can ride the wheelers right up there too, them hogs, and get them out of there. I said, well, I'd rather, he said, it will be 3:30 in the morning walking down there and getting them hogs out and packing them back up that mountain. He said, let's see if we can't do that. So we drove around, got up this old shack down in the mountains. Light comes on. Old Roger comes over to my truck. And he said, you want to talk to him? I said, he's your buddy. so he goes over and talks to him a little bit, and he comes back and he said, now, Plummer, I hope you ain't mad at me. He's going to let us cross him. He said, but we got to give him one of them hogs. I said, Lord God, that's a good trade. I'm thrilled.
Oh, yeah.
So we drove in there and give him a hog and hauled him out. Well, we get out, and by the time I get Chad back to Burville, Arkansas, it's 3:30 in the morning. He said, I ain't never going hunting with you again in my life. He said, my wife asked me when I left what time I'd be back, and he said, I told her 3:30. He said, I didn't know it'd be 3:30 a.m.
Yeah, that's how it goes, ain't it? Oh, that's funny. When I first started going, I'd do that. I'd tell my wife, I was like, well, I'm going to go down here and we're going to turn loose, and I should be home. I'd leave the house a little bit before dark. I said, I should be home by, 10, 11 o'clock. Lord, after, I guess, probably a year or two of hunting, she knows now, and I know better, don't ever put a time on it.
Oh, that's right. See, when I was young, married, my wife would ask, she'd say, when are you going to be back? I'd say, do I have stupid road right across my forehead? I said, no, ma'am. I said, I'm not giving you a time. We'll be back when we get back, because we don't know what we're going to run into when we get there. We may be back early. Right. We may be back real late, but we'll be back. And she's got to where she don't even ask anymore. I mean, it's just, you're going hog hunting. I'll see you when you get back.
Yeah, that's kind of, like I said, we're blessed to have wives like that. They, like mine, she knows I'm going to go hunting, and she knows I ain't bothering nothing. I ain't hurting nobody. And now there have been times when it's been like 2 or 3 days and I hadn't called her or texted her or something. She'll send me a message. Hey, you all right? Yeah.
Right. Send up a smoke signal or something.
Yeah. And that's what she told me. She said, look, at least every other day, let me know. Cause we travel a good bit, and sometimes we get some of them camps and there's no signal.
Right.
There's no phone service. It's not that I don't want to communicate or nothing. You can't.
Well, You know, and I tell the wife that too. When we go to places that I'm pretty certain we're going to lose signal, I'll tell her, you know, look, there ain't gonna be no contact, so you know we'll be back when we're back. You know,
That's right.
And she's good to, you know, she's good, and I'm blessed to have her for sure.
Yes.
You know, that old plot hound that jumped that bear and went the other way. I drove in mountains for 2 weeks after that, every day, knocked doors for what few have, you know, families was back in the mountains. Ain't nobody seen my hound. It's gone. Roger Atkinson told me, he said, Plummer, I'll find that hound. And he said, when I find him, I'll bring him back to you. Well, 3 months later, I didn't give up. I figured the dog's gone, you know. 3 months later, Roger called me. He said, Plummer, I've got your hound. I said, you got him? He said, yes, sir. He said, an old boy had stole him. He said, he said, I got to hearing reports about a guy that had a black colored hound tied behind his house. And so he said, I just drove up there to check. And he said, and I walked around his house and there stood that hound. He said, I just went around there and unleashed him, brought him around, put him in my truck. He said, I went to banging on the door and the guy opened the door. He said, that hound that you stole in the backyard, he said, I got him in my truck. And he said, that dog had a tracking unit on him and a shocking unit, and I'll be having that too. he said the guy went in the house, got the tracking unit, shocking unit, and the collar, and brought back to him. And he said, "See you later." And he brought me my hound. I said, "Well, golly, that's awesome."
Yeah, that worked out pretty good. I'm sure that other fella didn't want to argue none. He was like, "Okay, if it's gonna be that easy, here you go."
Yeah, he didn't even ask him. He said he pulled up and he heard the hound chopping back there, and he said he walked around the side of the house long enough that he could see him. He said, I just went around there and unhooked him and got him. He said, I knew that was him. But boy, we've treated some bear down in them old Buffalo River, down in them bottoms of that river down there, my goodness. And the roughest part is if you tree an old big boar bear up against a bluff that don't want to climb, it can get real. It can get to be a rodeo pretty quick right there. You're trying to slip in there and get them dogs caught off that bear when him standing up there. You can't outrun no bear, brother. I mean, it ain't gonna happen.
Now, y'all got bear season there, don't you?
Oh yeah, but you can't use dogs. Okay, you know, not like you can in the Appalachian.
I didn't know. I was curious. I know when I was younger, when I still lived in Arkansas, we were getting a lot of bear over on the eastern side of the state. You go down there in the milo fields, and you'd see them all the time off the levee, you know. And I remember when I was probably 10, 12 years old, I'd pray. I'm like, Lord, let us get a bear season. Let us get bear season. I wanted to run bear with dogs so bad, and I never did. Never was able to. And then just a few years ago, I finally got to go on my first one, and I'm telling you, it really is something special, you know.
Well, you know, I've probably treated more bear in the state of Arkansas than anybody with a pair of dogs that I know of. And the reason being is I hunted that buffalo down there a lot, and then I hunted a lot with dogs hog hunting. And an old boar bear smells a terrible lot like a boar hog. Mm-hmm. And if your dogs is a good hog dog, they'll just about take to a bear. And boy, we had one come up into the city limits of Barable one time, and which it wasn't uncommon to have them come into Eureka Springs and Grain Forest and Alpena, because there's a little more timber in the mountains coming up to them towns. But Bearville, Pension Mountain is to the south back there, but there's a lot of cattle farms between there and the city of Bearville. You know, they got to come across a lot of open ground, so you just didn't have them, you know, as often come up into the town. Well, I got a call one day from the sheriff's office, and they said, Plummer, we've got a bear in town. And now I normally find them pretty quick, because most of the bear that come into town like that are juvenile boar bears, because they'll be 18 months to 24 months old, 22 to 24 months old, 185 to 240 pounds, somewhere in there. Now, the bear we have here in the Ozarks are Manitoba stock black bear. The original stock of black bear, my grandpa used to call them honey bears. Mm-hmm. They'll be like eastern Arkansas, southeast, like White River Refuge and that stuff.
Yes, sir.
Them bear, 250 pounds is an average bear down there. You know, they just don't get as big. Now, they're the same species of black bear, but they're kind of like we was talking about them Catahoulas dogs and the foxhounds, different strain. You know.
Yes, sir.
And the Manitoba stock black bear can get 650 pounds. And so the Ozarks and the Washtenaws here in Arkansas have got the big Manitoba stock black bear, and they can get to be some big old boars now. And so anyway, but most of them, like I said, when they come to town, what happens is the mama bear has the litter, and most people think, they have one or twins. That's not true. A sow bear can have a litter just like a sow hog. She's got tits that run all the way down her belly, and it's according to the mass crop as to how many cubs she'll have. And if you ever kill an old sow bear and she's, whelping pups or cubs, however many tits she's got come to milk, that's how many cubs she's got.
Yes.
And they can have up to 6. I mean, I've seen them with 6 cubs. But anyway, when they have those cubs, they stay with the mother through that first year. And then the second year, she'll come back into season. And when she does, then a big boar bear will come in to breed her. Well, he'll tolerate the sow bear cubs, but he won't tolerate them boar bear cubs. He'll kill them and eat them if they don't get on out of town. They got to go.
Yes.
And so he runs them off. Well, then now they're like teenage kids trying to make a living. They got to figure out how to scratch and find some territory where they don't get run over by a big boar, and they can find something to eat. A lot of them end up in town raiding bird feeders and dog food and that kind of stuff, So anyway, I get this call invariable about this bear. And like I said, they're out of place and they don't know, the environment's wrong for them, and I can usually spot one pretty quick. Well, I'm driving through town looking at the places where they're saying they're seeing the bear, and I'm not seeing no bear. All day long, I'm getting these calls about this bear. So I called back to the dispatch sheriff's office, and I said, look, the word's got out, we got a bear in town. And I said, now every black lab, Rottweiler, and black chow's a bear, and I'm chasing stray dogs all over town, I think. And they said, Plummer, you're probably right. So I done it all day, and about 10:30 that night, I'm about 2.5 miles. I live right on the state line up there at Carling, Missouri, and I'm headed back to the house. I'm about 2.5 miles from the house, and they popped the mic again. They said, and of course I had a county code number and a state code number, and they said 72. They said, we just got another sighting on the bear. Well, I never even let off the gas. I'm going to the house. I ain't worried about it. And they said, but the sheriff's pretty concerned because somebody hit the bear, and we've got an injured bear in town. Uh-oh. I said, look, I'm about tired of this. I said, I'm going to the house, and I'm going to get me some dogs, and we're going to come back and put that bear up the bush and call this thing done. Well, then a city police officer, which is Marc Morris, he was from Colorado. Now he's an animal guy, but he's not so much a dog guy, but he's an animal guy, kind of like a crocodile hunter or something. I mean, he keeps all kinds of exotics and stuff. Anyway, he keys him back, and he says, 72, he said, I'll secure the scene for you. He said, I've dealt with a lot of bear in Colorado. I said, Mark, sounds like a good job for you. So I just went on, and I got 3 dogs, and I come back, and it's 10 miles back to town. So I drive back down there. And when I get there, it looks like 200 cars lined up down that city street. And I thought, what in the world? How did everybody find out so fast that there's a bear been run over down here? Well, I'm weaving through the traffic with my truck, and I figure out real quick why there's so many people down there. Every cop in the county, the troopers, the sheriff, all the county cops, the city cops, everybody's there wanting to see the bear. All right. Marc Morris had yellow ribboned the road off, stopped traffic, because he didn't want nobody to drive over the spot where the bear had been hit. He didn't want to mess the scent up. Okay. So now it's cold. It's December. And Mark he's a cop, brother. You cut him and he'll bleed blue. I mean, he's a cop. All right. He's dressed he's black-headed. He's dressed in a dark navy coat with a black fur collar. He's got black driving gloves on, black Rocky boots. He's blacked out. All right. Well, I'm collaring dogs off the tailgate. And the first dog I drop off the tailgate is drifting that bear track immediately. And because, I mean, we've treated a lot of bears. They know what that is. So when he comes off that tailgate, there's a wad of bear hair there in the middle of the road where that truck had hit that bear. And Mark drops down on his knees and picks that wad of bear hair up. And the first dog that comes across the road, he shoves that wad of bear hair at him. I guess he thought he had to drop scent the hound or something. That dog bit him. He squalled like a panther. He said, "That dog just bit me."
Oh,
I said, "Well, that's real smart, Mark, shoving a wad of bear hair up his nose dressed in black." I
yeah.
said, well, the dog figured out he was a man, turned him loose, and down the mountain he went. All right, now I walk over to the fence, and I'm at the barbed wire fence there, field, and the sheriff and the canine officer, the county canine officer's there, and he's got him a Rankin 10 bred German Shepherd sitting right there. Now, he's supposed to be the dog man for the police department. He's supposed to know a little bit about dogs. All right. Well, we're standing there and listening just a little bit. I hear them when they hit the tree down there. And they treed the cedar glade down there. And there's I said, "Well, boys, they got them treed. I got him treed. I better get on down there." And I said, "Now I'm bluffing because I can't really legally make any of the police officers stay up there. But I said, y'all stay here. I'll go take care of the bear." And Mark says, the guy that got bit, he says, "Ah, Plummer," he said, "I've dealt with a lot of bear in Colorado. I'll come help you." And I said, "Well, he had his mag light." I said, "Well, you can come. Rest of y'all stay here." Well, the canine cop, he says, "Plummer, how do you know they got that bear treed?" I said, "It's called a tree mark." I said, you stay here." So we went on down there, and we get down through this cedar glade, and there's a big old cedar. It'd probably take you and me both to reach around it.
Man.
And I got one dog hanging from the lowest limb like a pit bull from a tire, and the other two tree in the tree hard as they can go. Well, you can smell the boar bear in the air. I knew it was a boar, okay? And it's strong when I walked in down there. All right. And old Mark walks up there with his mag light, and he shines up that tree, and he shines back down, keeps walking. He's just shining through the timber, walking on down the hill. I said, "Mark, where you going?" He said, "Well, I'm looking for that bear." He said, "He's down here somewhere." I said, "Mark, the bear's in this tree." He said, "Well, no, Plummer, I shined that tree. Ain't no bear in that tree." I said, "Mark, the bear's in that tree." He said, "Well, how do you know?" I said, "The dogs are treeing that tree. That's how I know that bear's in that tree." I said, "Them dogs eating his hind end up when he went up that tree." I said, "Come here." And he comes around there, and I shined up that tree, and he actually broke limbs going up that tree. He was moving so fast. I said, "Now, this is taller than the other trees around it, so the canopy closes out the top." I said, "You're going to have to back up through there a little bit and shine back and see if you can see a bear." I said, "He'll be sitting right in the top." So he goes backing up through that timber, and when he sees him, he goes, "My God, Plummer, that's a big bear. That's a big bear." He said, "That dude's 9 inches between the eyeballs."
Oh my goodness.
and so I said, "Well, doggone it." I said, "I don't have a trank gun, and we use romping to put them down with. And if you shoot a bear with romping, it works really good, but you got to be real quiet and let them just drift off to sleep. Now, if you move too fast, or if you make a loud noise or talk too loud, it can actually flip on them, and it's like you gave them a shot of ephedrine instead of something to put them to sleep." So anyway, I called Bob Wilson in the county south of me down there at the Madison County Wildlife Management area, and I said, "Bob," I said, "I got a bear treat up here." I said, "I ain't got a romping gun." I said, "A trank gun. I need you to bring your trank gun up here." He said, "Plummer, it'll take me 45 minutes to get there." I said, "We ain't going nowhere. We'll be right here." All right. So all them cops get to filtering down there because it took him an hour, from the time we got to bear treat for him to get there with the romping. Well, all them cops had done sifted it down there, and so there's a big circle of guys around on the tree. Well, that canine cop's got his 10 red German Shepherd there, and he's watching that old blue boy dog of mine over there, and he said, "Plummer," he said, "how do you get that dog to stay on cue like that?" He said, "I've been watching him. He looks like one of them Dalmatians. It's your concrete Dalmatians in people's yard." He said, "That dude ain't moved. He ain't blinked in 45 minutes. I said, "Brother, that dog knows what a bear is. He's been mauled by a bear before." I said, "He knows what's up that tree, and he means to pay some retribution." And so anyway, he says, "I can't get my German Shepherd to stay on cue for 5 minutes." Well, so anyway, old Bob gets there with the romping gun, and I climbed the tree next to the bear way up there, and I shot him straight across. Well, it takes about 10 minutes for that to go into effect, so I skinnied back down the tree, and I'm standing at the bottom, and I've done it on purpose, Joey. Every once in a while, as old coon hunters used to say, you got to let one get a little fur in his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And so keep them wired up and want to do the job.
That's right.
So I'm standing down at the bottom of the tree, and I ain't even put Blue Boy on a leash or nothing. He's loose over there looking up. And I caught the old bill dog, and I caught Tiger, and I've got them by the collar, but I don't have them on no leash. And I'm standing there in the tree. All of a sudden, that old tree goes shaking. And old Bob Wilson hollers, "Watch him, Plummer, he's falling." And that bear fell out of that tree, bud, and he fell flat right in front of me, just called whop. And when he did, them two dogs I had by the collar like to pull me on top of the bear, so I just turned them loose. Well, brother, when I did, that bear jumped up, and he caught them two dogs that I turned loose. He caught one in one arm and one in the other, and he stood up. And buddy, he's eating them like ice cream. He had gnawed on one for a minute, he'd gnaw on the other, and they're screaming, "I'm dying, I'm dying!" And about that time, that old blue boy dog swirled around there and bit him right in the tail. Son, he was trying to tear a hole in his britches. And and that old bear still had them two dogs in his arms, and he looks over his left shoulder, looks down, sees that old blue boy dog got him by the tail end, and he flings them two dogs loose that he's got and tries to whirl and get the old blue boy dog. Well, he run him down, sure enough. But them other two, they triangulated him, and boy, they'd hit him, and he'd run one down, and two would get him. He'd run one down, two would get him. And old Bob Wilson hollers, "Get that dog off that bear." Well, yeah, buddy, that's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah.
So I run in there, and the old tiger dog, now, no, it's got to take it back. The old bill dog, as one of the dogs had been mauled by the bear. So I sneak up there behind him, and you ain't calling them off. They're wound up, son. You ain't calling them out. So I reach in there, and I catch that old bill dog by the left back leg. Well, now, he's just been mauled by the bear, brother, and he's pretty unnerved. And when I caught him by that back leg, kind of shocked him, he whirled to bite me. And he seen it was Daddy, and he'd rather fight the bear than he had bite Daddy. So so I pulled him back by that left back leg, and I'm watching that bear as I'm coming back. Well, I see a Navy uniform on my right there, and it's Mark Morris, that city cop that had got bit in the road up there.
Yes.
And I said, "Here, take this dog." Well, I guess now, Joey, he could have easily caught the dog by the collar from where I had him, but I guess he thought I had the dog by the leg. He had held him by the leg. He reached and caught old Bill's leg. Well, I go back in to get old Tiger, and old Tiger's watching me and watching the bear. He don't want me to catch him because he's having too much fun. Well, the bear charges us.
Oh,
now,
Lord.
brother, hey, I'm running so fast. I'm running across saplings, dogs, people. My feet ain't hardly touching the ground. And that bear, that dog sees that bear coming. Old Bill, that old cop's holding by the back leg, sees that bear coming. Well, he don't mean to be mauled again, buddy. He whirled and hit old Mark Morris right in the bend of the elbow. And he squalls out. He said, "My God," he said, "I'm worried about the bear, and the dog's just eating me alive." So I run over and got that romping gun, and I went to plugging that bear with romping. I put enough romping in that dude to put a rhino down. And when we loaded him in the bear trap, he was still alive or awake. You know, he was groggy, but he was still moaning and awake when we slid that big guy in that bear trap. And but I wished I'd have videoed that 1,000 times. I could.
Oh, I guarantee you.
I'd been on the History Channel.
That's one of them right there. It's almost like old Jerry Clower when that dog's biting him. Hey, somebody's got to have some relief. Just get up here and amongst us.
Just shoot up in here amongst us. One of us got to have some relief.
That's it, man. And now those were all Catahoulas.
No, I had one bloodhound.
I think so. I knew you had bloodhound. I mean, I knew you had some hounds and stuff still. I didn't know if you had, Catahoulas then or.
Yeah, I had two Catahoula dogs and one bloodhound on that deal.
I got you. Now on your plot, I mean on your Catahoulas and stuff. What was the bloodlines that you started out with?
Well, what I started out with was the old family bloodline dogs. And then the first outcross that I personally was able to make was on old Chester Wager's bloodline.
Yeah, I remember we talked some about that last time.
Yeah. Now, I will say this, and I won't back up on it a bit. I think that Chester Wager in his lifetime done more good to propagate the Catahoula breed than any man alive. I mean, for a Hall of Famer for the Catahoula breed, Chester he'd be up there.
I got you.
You know, there's other good ones too. I mean, Aubrey Aiden out of Mississippi, Clyde Keating out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Clyde's dead now. Old Vernon Traxler. Now Vernon Traxler, was probably, if we had to hang a title on him, it would have been probably the father of the bobtail Catahoula dog, because he loved the bobtail Catahoula dog. And old Vernon had feed 75 head,
Yes.
And now there's an old boy that wrote a book, and I'm trying to think, Don Abney, and he got into Catahoulas pretty big. But his claim to fame, the reason Don Abney, and I've talked to Don about this, the reason Don got into Catahoula dogs is Vernon Traxler was his neighbor.
Oh, okay.
so he kind of got started with some of Vernon's dogs, But those old men like that were the old bloodline breeders of the day. Sam Mason out of Louisiana, Sam Mason out of Texas. Now, Sam Mason out of Texas he's probably 85, 86 now or something like that. And he's still operational. He's got a hog pen over there, and he trains hog dogs in it. It's big enough, he can kick a dog out in there and have a hog up and all that. And now the Sam Mason out of Louisiana, he's up there in years, but he was a cow dog man, But anyway, those are guys that really, really put a lot of good dogs out back in the day,
Now, you said you were talking about the Aubrey stuff. There were some guys that came up from Louisiana and hunted with us, and we were talking about their dogs, and I really liked their dogs. And I asked him about it, and that's all he would tell. All he knew was he just said that he just knew they were Aubrey dogs. He didn't know nothing about them. And he didn't, we didn't go into anything about, Catahoulas or anything like that. Originally they came from, I want to say like from Jason Wallace, maybe. And these guys live in Louisiana.
Mr. Aubrey Aiden lived in Mississippi, and he was he was a dog man, and he could identify the characteristics that is needed to propagate a good dog and make a good dog bloodline, and he did.
Yes,
he really did. The last time I talked with Mr. Aubrey, he may be dead now. I don't know. Most of the old gentlemen are passing on, but he had got too old to breed and do anything. He was out of it. Now there's a lot of people that still tout that they've got Aubrey Aiden dogs, but they're generations away from that. Matter of fact, that leads me to another point I'd like to say is this. It's become, especially with not so much the hunters, but the hobby breeders out here, or the people that have pet homes for Catahoula dogs. It's a popular thing for them to go to Embark or Wisdom Panel or something like that and get their dogs DNA'd. Well, there's a real problem with that. And I've called Embark, and I've spent hours and hours on the phone talking to their vets, talking to their corporate people and all that about this. But what happened with this Embark deal, and they're hurting a lot of people's feelings out there, because I've had people that had, one lady in particular, she said, I know for a fact I bought my original dog off of Aubrey Aiden's yard, and the dogs that are down line off that are right out of that Aubrey Aiden dog. Well, they had it DNA tested through Embark, and it come back. Now, you're going to love this. Comes back and says it's got hound in it and Staffordshire Terrier and all that. Well, guess what? That's what they made them dogs with. Okay. All right. Now, but they said, wasn't purebred Catahoula. Well, here's the reason. Now, guys, I'm not just totally stupid about genetics. All right. And so what's happened is there's a lady that when she had the wherewithal to do it before any of the rest of us even thought about it, but she held up her hand real high and waved at the back of the class and said, hey, I've got purebred Catahoulas, and I swear to God they are, and you can use my dogs as a bloodline sample, a genetic sample, to judge all of the Catahoula dogs by.
Oh,
well, here's the problem with that. It's just like I said on the last podcast, these dogs were bred in isolation, and your dogs in Alabama might have a little different hound mixture in them. It might have been American Bulldog out there on the Appalachian end rather than Pit Bull, okay? Because there's a lot of American Bulldogs out there. It could have been that they had oh, boy, they're going to love this. It could have been a English pointer instead of a German short hair pointer that they made their dog in it. But when they put that genetic sample in, they don't test beyond that, see. So it doesn't matter if that dog had bird dog and bulldog and hound and all those other things in it. They look simply at that sample that they've got, and they judge every other dog off of that sample. Well, my beef with Embark is this, and they told me I've got it in an email today. They told me, they said, Mr. Plummer, you're 100% right, but they're not going to fix it because it's a matter of dollars to them. Doesn't pay them any more to do it. But I told them, I said, if you're gonna genetically test Catahoula dogs, you're hurting a lot. I've had people with Chester Wagers dogs that have called me, same thing. They said, we know this dog is purebred, but it says he's got hound in him and he's got, this other stuff in him. Well, that's because the dog does. And he don't line up exactly with the genetic sample that this one person gave.
That's
so
right.
What I told Embark, I said, look, you guys need to get a sample, a representative sample of the major bloodlines of these dogs that are out there, and then you judge off of the cumulative sample, and then you'll have a true Catahoula. I said, but you can't take one bloodline and use it to judge everybody else by. You can't do it.
Lord, no.
And they know that, but they won't change it.
That's exactly
and so,
right.
But boy, there's a lot of people and that are out there that, oh my God, they even do this. Some of them, and I told them, I said, I don't know how stupid you think people are, but some of the samples come back and they'll say Staffordshire Terrier, and some of them will come back and say Pit Bull. Well, guess what? Those are the same dog.
Same dog here in the once it came over to U.S.
That's exactly the same dog. Matter of fact, they ended up with some genetic anomalies in the Staffordshire Terriers that they needed fixed, and they had to go back and breed the pit bulls to fix it.
Yes.
And so anyway, that you can't differentiate in the DNA on a Staffy and a pit bull. No. A Staffy's just a cold pit bull. Is all he is.
And like a lot of people, they look at the Staffy, and they're thinking English Staffy. The little bitty, short, smaller dog. That's an English. That's a whole different Staffy. The American Staffordshire Terrier. We used to dual register our dogs, American Pit Bull Terrier and Staffordshire Terrier. We could get homeowners insurance if we had a Staffordshire.
Right. And see, the UKC years ago wanted to separate itself from the fighting dogs, and they quit registering pit bulls, but they will register Staffordshire Terriers.
And that's what we did. And we did the ADBA. We did the pit bull through the ADBA.
Right. Yeah. And that is, and so I said, how stupid do you think people are? I mean, the DNA, you're saying one of them's a Staffy and one of them's a pit bull, and they're the same. You can't differentiate in the DNA. And they said, well, that's true.
Yeah.
But these uneducated people out here that don't know, and I'm not saying that in a bad way, they just don't know.
Yeah. They just don't know. That's all it comes down to.
My dog's, got all these different things in it, and he's not purebred Catahoula. Well, I beg to differ, So anyway, but I thought I'd spit that out there.
No, that's good because I've seen those Embark tests come back from Catahoulas, and they'll have a little bit of Airedale in them, and I mean like just a small amount, like you said, there'll be a little pit bull in them, some pointer. And people are like, well, those aren't purebred. I was like, what do you mean? How do you know? I was like, do you really think that all of them are the same? It boils down to exactly what you said. Each area, the deep Southeast, Florida and Georgia and Alabama, they're probably going to have a little different strain than Mississippi and Arkansas, Oklahoma and Texas.
Well, here's what that boils down to. Okay. In the early part of this country, when people were using dogs and we had small farms, okay, that was the driving engine in the South.
Yes.
Was the small farms. Okay. We had small farms in the South. They bred these dogs for functionability. They didn't have any care or forward thought to think about one day they'll be registered. They were They were breeding a working dog.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I don't care if you've got an Airedale, a Great Dane, a Chihuahua, a Beagle, or what. There was a mixture of dogs that went into making those dogs. They didn't just crop out as a Dachshund.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
That's
they
right.
didn't just crop out as an Irish Wolfhound. We bred them up to that. And it's just like this story of the Teddy Roosevelt Terrier, the Doberman Pinscher, all these dogs that are now purebreds, and they're standardized in the breed they are, but they didn't start that way.
No.
They started with other dogs being bred together to make that standardized breed.
Yes.
And that's exactly what's happened with the Catahoula dogs. But when you do it in separate, in basically, like I said, in isolation, because each one of these bloodline breeders was doing his best to make the best dog he could make. And the one in the 5 counties over might be doing it, but have just a little different something in his dogs. And so this dog, this Catahoula breed hasn't totally melded into one, and matter of fact, I've told people, because I know him. Well, I better shut up. I'm gonna get myself in trouble. I will just put it this way: there's Catahoulas out there and lines of Catahoulas that if that's all there was, again, like I told you the other day, I'd be playing golf or something, because I wouldn't raise that. That's not my standard. That's not what I'm gonna do. Okay, and but if they're happy to do that, and they're feeding those dogs, glory to God. If they like them, I love them. But I'm.
Well, no, I mean it's 100%. People, I don't know. I guess they get like, I guess you'd say kennel blind or breed blindness or something. You could, like you said, the functionability and durability of a dog that works for what you need it for, a purpose-built dog. For I guess for an instance, I was breeding up a Hyde Terrier.
Sure.
My version of it. I used the exact same recipe that they did when they started. They had three main breeds and a fourth breed as an outcross later on. Mm-hmm. Well, now they don't use the Airedale because they can't find any good ones. So they started incorporating a couple of other big Mollister type dogs, like I can't even remember what all they were doing. Anyway, my mind went blank. But I had a guy, and he was telling me, he was like, "Well, yours aren't real." I was like, "They standing right here eating." He's like, "Well, no, they're not real Hyde Terriers." I was like, "Well, it's just the version that I wanted." I said, "I'm not passing them off as a German Hyde Terrier that the Germans bred up. I'm not trying to pass them off. I'm just saying this is my version." I said, and they were actually a crossbreed mutt that was designed to work. They were not fashion dogs. They were not. Nobody cared about registering them. These dogs were a few old boys got together, and they bred these dogs up for what they like. And that guy, he said, "Yeah, but those people in Germany, they're breeding up the real ones." And I've had some of the ones from Germany, and I've got some right outside right now from Germany and Lithuania. The parents were imported, and they're fine animals. I love them. They're good. I like the ones I done. But to make my point, though, that's what I told him. I said, "Do you really think that those people in Germany," and I'm not saying all of them are like this by no means, I said, "Do you think they're going to send you, somebody they don't know, the very best dog that they have on their yard?" He said, well, no. He said, "Well, they sent me one so that way I could put the word out, and that way they could start selling them." I said, "Well, then they're in it for the wrong reasons anyway."
Right.
And he said, "Yeah, but these are from Germany." I said, "It doesn't matter where they're from."
Well, Germany has been very key in developing a lot of dog breeds.
Sure enough.
And those people, were very good at what they did.
Yes, sir.
In making these dogs. But I'm sitting here looking at a book right now from Raymond Plummer, spelled the same way my name is, and he is from England. Okay. Well, that's where the Plummer family originated from. I could get into the history of the Plummer family as well, but we came from England and our family come into Onslow, North Carolina, and migrated across to Illinois, down into Tennessee and Missouri and Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the Plummer family left and went to Australia. So there's Plumbers in Australia. But anyway, this Brian Plummer is actually responsible for breeding up the Plummer Terrier.
Yes.
Which is kind of like a Patterdale Terrier or a Yag or something like that over there. It's a small ratter. It's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also bred a bunch of lurchers, and he set out to breed the ideal lurcher. And he crossed dogs up to do that, and he ended up with a Merle, kind of like Jerome McDaniel's dogs. He ended up with a Merle lurcher breed of dogs over there that was pretty famous in England.
Yeah.
But it's putting together. They take traits from different dogs, just like I was telling you how they, historically put these Catahoula dogs, what we call a Catahoula dog today, together. And it doesn't matter if you're hunting you look at a Goodman hound. I've got an article from a man, and he is he was in the somewhere in the registries of those dogs, but Goodman hounds, which are a strain of foxhounds.
Strain of foxhounds.
And he said his first set of Goodman hounds he had was almost totally leopard spot, Merle colored. Okay, well, you go back to the beginning when George Washington had them on on Mount Vernon over there on his place. In the dogs they were bringing over, the two dogs that will be found in most every foxhound are two dogs that came from Ireland, a dog named Mountain and a bitch named Muse. Mountain and Muse. And Mountain and Muse were both Merle spotted hounds.
Mm-hmm.
Merle spotted. Imagine that.
Yep.
And but anyway, they are a Duke's mixture that we've just tried to conform to a certain breed standard. And if we're not careful, the working ability of these dogs is way easier to lose it than it is to get it and keep it. And if we're not very careful as dog men to watch for those specific traits and breed for those things, we can lose it. If you don't believe it, look at the Irish setter. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
The Irish setter used to be a bird dog when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. Now I'll give you $100 for every bird dog you can find. It's an Irish setter, and I won't give you $100.
That's right.
Because they got in, they were pretty dogs, they were beautiful, and they got to showing them, putting them in the show ring, and they bred the bird dog right out of it.
Look at the Airedale.
Oh yeah, the Airedale, same thing.
Airedale used to be like the one of the dogs, like you said, similar like the Catahoula, the smaller farms. A lot of people had an Airedale. It was a watchdog. It was a tree dog. Worked cows, catch hogs. You did it. It was a utilitarian.
Gritty. You could run mountain lions with them.
That's right.
Tree bear with them and all kinds of stuff.
And now you can't. I mean, like you said, I'm not going to say there's not any, because there are some working Airedales, and I've seen a few, and I've got one or two, but you will go through 100 or more before you find that one. And that's
kind of like with the Irish setter, or they're actually breeding Gordon setters back to Irish setters and doing things to try to bring the Irish setter back. Mm-hmm. They had to do the very same thing with the Irish wolfhound. Okay, yes. They almost lost that breed totally, and they had to breed other things back. And the Irish wolfhound we got today is really not the same Irish wolfhound that they had back in the days of the kings of Scotland and Ireland and all that. And so the same thing with the Airedales. They've done it with the boxers. They've done it with, matter of fact, here's something that I wish, like the NALC would come to terms with. The UKC, like in the coonhounds, they used to, every few years, they would open up a specific breed to an open registration. Okay. And that meant if you had say for instance, they done it in red bones, and what they would do is they would open up the registration for a red bone. Now your dog did not have to be a red bone. It just had to look like one. Okay. It had to have the physical appearance of a red bone, and they would send a judge out. And if that dog would tree a coon and the judge could see the coon you could single line register that dog as a red bone. And what that done for the breed is it kept the tree genetic coming back into the breed. See, they wanted dogs to keep that tree genetic going in them hounds. And they would do that every few years. They'd open up the registry for an open registration, and they would send judges out. And you could, and you believe this or not, but I've seen black and tan litters that may have 10, 12 pups, and 2 of them be solid red.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Well,
I believe
what?
that.
During the days of open registration, you could have took those 2 red dogs and registered them as red bones, and then single line registered them. Now they would always be single line, those dogs, but if you bred them back after a few generations, they'd end up being purple ribbon red dogs, just like the rest of them.
Sure.
Okay? And so it's just smart in the animal husbandry to do that. You need to refreshen your stock, you know.
And like talking about the color and stuff like that, and how it's passed on. You know, the with the Catahoula, the merle is what catches a lot of people's eyes. And you sent me a Punnett square, and that's something right there. I really think a lot of people should look at, so they can see, you know, what it takes to actually have one.
Right. And here's.
Go ahead.
Let me speak to that just a little bit.
Wear it out.
When I told you on the last podcast that when I was a boy, probably a third of all Catahoulas was bobtail. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a natural fact. It's indicative of the breed, okay? And due to the registry inhibition on the thing, these new breeders have getting in here and thinking, oh God, we don't want a bobtail because that's a serious fault. Well, that's a part of the breed, all right? Well, another thing that was very, very popular when I was a boy in Catahoulas is a double merle, a dog with a lot of white on it. You've seen probably a third of them were double merle. Now you've got all these liberals that don't, oh my God, we can't breed to get a double merle because you might get a deaf one or one with a bad eye. And we just can't stand the thought of killing one, knocking one in the head. So they bred away, and what they've done, see, they built this breed on breeding a single merle to a single merle. Now, a single merle is a dog, typically, phenotypically, if you're looking at it, he's completely blue leopard, completely red leopard, yellow leopard, whatever. All right. He may have a Galte trim. He may have some piebald trim on him, but other than that, he's solid leopard, okay, or merle. All right. Now, when you get to your double merle dog, now it's not 100%, nothing ever is, but typically they'll have more white on phenotypically. If they get a white ear, you got to watch that ear because he could be deaf in that ear. Now, not always, but he could. Okay, You got to watch if he's got a white band that goes over his hips in the back, or if it crosses his back, watch that pup because he could be deaf. Okay, so there's things to watch for. But now here's another thing that people call me all the time. They say, "I want one of them solid black Catahoulas with glass eyes." There's no such thing. There is absolutely no such thing. What if that dog has got glass eyes? It is a merle, because the only way a Catahoula dog can get glass eyes is because the merle genetic crosses his eyes, and that's how some of them end up with crack eyes. Some of them end up with a complete glass eye. Is where that merling lands in the eye. Okay. But the merle gene affects not only the color of the hair, but it affects the color of the skin, the nose, and the eyes and the pads of the feet. So if you've got a solid black dog with double glass eyes, he's a cryptic merle is what he is. Okay. And what happens if you get a cryptic dog, it shortens the merle gene and it expresses as a solid. Okay. Now that dog will still breed consistent to a single merle, but he will produce a lot of the cryptics. Now the same thing in a red dog is called recessive red. It's the exact same thing. One of them's for black, eulmelanin, one of them's for pheomelanin. But a recessive red does the same thing. Like, if you've got a solid yellow dog and he's got double glass eyes, he's a recessive red. He's a diluted recessive red, but he's a recessive red. Same thing with a solid red dog. So if you've got a dog, say a Catahoula dog, and you're wondering if that dog is, and here's another thing that can really throw people off, is the piebald genetic, okay? And a lot of people don't understand that what a piebald genetic can do to a Catahoula dog, because some Catahoulas, a piebald, if you want to know what a piebald genetic is, you look at a border collie. He's got a white blaze face. He's got a white ring neck, white chest, white tips of the toes, maybe up the stockings a little bit, and a white tip of the tail. That's piebald. Okay. And a lot of Catahoulas have that. But in the Catahoula breed, the piebald genetic can get carried away and overly expressed, and you can end up with a dog almost snowball white, and he's not double merle, he's piebald. Okay. Now, how do you tell the difference in a piebald and a merle? Look at his eyes, look at his nose, look at the pads of his feet. Okay. If that dog's got a butterfly nose, that means a two-colored nose, he's got a merle genetic. If that dog's got glass eyes, he's got a merle genetic. If that dog's got white spots on black pads or pink spots, he's got a merle genetic. Okay. So if I'm looking at a piebald dog and he's not merle, because you can get a piebald that's in a recessive solid. So I may be losing people here. I don't know.
No,
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. If you're looking at and I've got some, if you're looking at a dog that's almost completely white and you're thinking, is that dog a double merle? If he's got a solid black nose, if he's a black genetic dog, if he's got a black nose, he's got brown eyes, and he's got solid black feet on the pads of his feet, he's just a recessive piebald. Okay. And so actually Carmen Cochran down in Florida started a little Facebook group page for piebald Catahoulas. And there's not very many pictures, not very many members on that. I'm one of them, but most people don't even know that a Catahoula can come that way. Now they can come. Matter of fact, I had another Catahoula breeder come to my kennel one day, and I had a young female there. She was probably 6 months old. I called her Lucy. And she had agate trim on her face, which the agate trim is the brown trim like you get on a Doberman or a Rottweiler or a black and tan hound. So it's the brown trim that comes on the cheeks, the eyebrows, the legs, under the tail. That's agate trim. Okay. Now the agate trim can be rust, it can be buff, it can be brindle, it can have brindling in it, but that's agate. Okay. And now a Catahoula dog can have agate trim, piebald trim, and the merle pattern. So he can have all that, all wrapped up in one pattern. Okay. But he comes up and I got this female there, and she's got black spots on her, and she's got the agate trim on her cheeks and her eyebrows. And he walks up and he says, "Plummer, when did you go to breeding Walker hounds?" And I said, "Oh my God, boy." I said, "That's a piebald bitch." And he said, "Well, I didn't. I've never seen one." And I said, "Well, they happen." And you can get those, especially out of the wager bloodline. You can get those cropping up pretty regular. So you gotta understand what you got there. And the reason I say you gotta understand what you got, because if you want to know how to breed those dogs specifically for color, you need to know what your dog is.
Yes.
And if you don't know what he is, you don't know what he's going to express and produce. I typically can look at a dog. I don't hardly ever send my dog in for DNA to see what their merle is, because I know. And if I'm in any doubt, all I got to do is breed it, and boom, I know immediately what the dog is. Because of what type of puppies they produce. See, in the colors. But now, and you talking about the colors of Catahoula dogs, we're talking about that. The Catahoula dogs become in what we would, old hunters would call a saddleback. Yes. Well, now the saddleback dogs, for the educated term for that, is creeping tan. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I've had a lot of my pups can be born, they'll be solid blue leopard, single merle, solid blue leopard with agate trim. And as that dog grows and gets older, that tan that's on his legs and on his face will creep up. If it's on his head, it'll creep all the way over his head and down his neck. And as he grows, the tan on his legs will come up, and he'll end up being a saddleback dog. And if you can see the picture of him as a puppy, he's a solid blue leopard. And as he's grown, he's a blue leopard saddleback. Huh. And it just changes, as he grows, and that's called creeping tan. And then the double D recessive dilutes, those are the dogs that are like the blue, solid blue dogs, like a lot of your blue lacies, even some of your yellow black mouths and your Catahoulas. You come in a double D recessive dilute. Now what happens with that is that, again, that is a Merle modifying gene. Okay. And not just a Merle modifying gene, it's a color modifying gene that say for a red dog that has a double D recessive can end up being a champagne, a lilac, a fawn. It's a diluted red. Okay. And that's what does that. Now, the dog, so you got the double helix DNA, and when that comes unwound, each the male and the female each give half like the 23andMe. Think of it that way. The people where you send off for genetics. The 23 means there's 23 of the alleles comes off on the DNA to that female gives, and 23 that the male gives. All right. So now, if that dog, say for instance, I've got a blue bitch, I call Indigo, and she's solid blue. She's a beautiful dog. All right. She's a double D recessive dilute. All right. Now, she can only give one of her recessive Ds to her puppies. Okay. So now, if you've got one, and a lot of Catahoula dogs carry one D. All right. They will not express a diluted color because it takes two recessive Ds, for them to express any kind of diluted color. A blue is a diluted black. Okay. So if I breed that Indigo bitch and she's got a double D, she's double D recessive dilute, and I bred her to a dog that didn't carry a D, then every one of those puppies would be the brighter colors, and none of them would be the dilute colors, because she gave the puppies a D, but one D will not express. Okay. Yes. So now let's say I bred her to a dog that carried a single D but didn't express. He'll give half, of his DNA. So the puppies will get a D from him and a D from her, and 50% of that litter will be double D recessive, and 50% of that litter will be single D. That means they'll not express, but they'll carry the D. The 50% that is expressed will have a double D. Now, I may have lost everybody right there, but that's the double D recessive dilute. And so, when you're looking at breeding dogs and you're doing it for color and that kind of thing. And here's another thing with the Catahoula breed. One thing, I was talking about when the double Merles were probably a third of all Catahoula dogs were double Merles back before the days of registry. And even when we started the registries, they were still probably a third of them was double Merle. All right. But what's happened is everybody's got soft, and we don't want to have we don't have to want to cull a puppy. So what they have gone to doing is they're breeding and you'll see that on one of them Punnett squares I sent you. They're breeding a single Merle to an AA recessive solid. And what happens with that is you'll get a 50% litter that's single Merle and 50% that's solid. Well, now we've got way more solid dogs in the market than ever in the history of the Catahoula breed has been, because people don't want to get a deaf puppy. So they breed a single Merle to a solid. Matter of fact, if they find out you bred a Merle to a Merle, single Merle, oh, they'll haze you on Facebook like crazy, buddy. Mm. Oh, you don't know what you're doing. You mean sorry, so-and-so. You could get a deaf puppy. Well, they've morphed the whole breed now. We've got more solid Catahoulas than we ever have. Okay. Yes. Not to say that solid Catahoulas won't work, but they've got so many of them now. They're trying to, because everybody wants a pretty dog. Everybody wants a blue leopard. Okay. Everybody wants a blue leopard. That's the chrome-plated quarter horse, 4 stocking legs and blaze face. That's what everybody wants. All right. So now they've started these own groups, solid Catahoulas do it better and all this different stuff, trying to peddle these solid dogs, because guess what? If you go to the dog pound, the number one dogs that you will find at the dog pound are solid black dogs. Oh, yeah. The only dog that you can effectively sell that's solid black is a black lab. Okay. Every other dog out there, they want something fancy. They want something colored. All right. Now we're hurting the Catahoula breed by only breeding for blue leopard dogs. Okay. Because these dogs come in every color. They can be yellow, blue, red. They can be spotted. They can be, tweed or patchwork. They can be leopard. They can be piebald. They can be creeping tan. They can be double D recessive. They can be all these different things, and they can be all that brindle. They can be all that mixed. And see, brindle. Let's look at brindle.
Mm-hmm.
The brindle comes from plot hounds, and it comes from pit bulls. Okay.
Yes.
Now, if you want to look, you can look. I've got articles from the old Hunter Horn magazines way back in the day, where the Plot brothers and the Plot family had what they call it, spec or something like that. But anyway, a lot of the Plot hounds used to be Merle.
Yep.
Now, you know why? Because they bred to them Merle cur dogs from Rayburn Gap, Georgia, from Elijah Crow.
Yes, sir.
And one thing about a Plot hound, I used to show some hounds, and one thing about a Plot hound, it's hard to champion a Plot hound against a lot of these other hounds on the bench show, because the first thing that a judge is going to do is he grabs the hound's ears and he pulls them to the end of his nose. And that ear has to come to the end of that dog's nose or past, or he's docked on points. And there's very few Plot hounds that have got an ear long enough to reach the end of their nose. Why is that? Because they got cur dog in them.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of cur dog? Well, leopard cur, Catahoulas, whatever you want to call it. Okay. And then, but the cross went both ways. We also got the Plot. Well, they made that cross. They also bred the Plots to the spotted dogs. And so therein comes the brindling. Okay. And then from the pit bulls, they get the brindling. All right. But now here's the deal. Brindling can come in a single Merle, brindle, or it can come in an AA recessive solid brindle. Brindling comes off the KBR gene in the locus. Okay. Now the K gene is black. The BR is the brindling. If that dog that has a brindle didn't have that brindling gene, it would be a solid black dog. What that brindling gene does is it shrinks the base coat into brindling stripes on that dog and exposes another color underneath. Okay, so all brindle dogs would be black if they didn't have the KBR brindle gene. Okay, now you can look, say for instance, in some of my Catahoula dogs. You can have like all your Plot hounds, all your pit bulls are AA recessive solid brindles. Okay, the solid colored dog brindle with a brindling gene. All right. The Merle dogs can the Catahoulas can either come as an AA recessive solid with a brindle gene, which will never have glass eyes, never have spots, and that kind of thing. But then you can have a brindling that comes on a Merle gene. I've had dogs that were born spotted and broke up into brindle as they grow. And then they have glass eyes. Of course, if the glass covers their eyes, they can have butterfly nose, spots on their feet, that kind of thing. But there's two different types of brindle. Okay. And the Catahoula is cool about the fact. And one more thing I wanted to mention, since we're talking about that, and it's, this may be way too scientific, or I'm trying to keep it in layman's terms.
No, we want it.
But if you're looking at, let me think here, the best way to put this. Well, I probably better not just keep diving into that hole, because that can get pretty deep. And I try to, when I'm talking about stuff like this, I don't want to make it so difficult that the layman can't understand what's going on.
Yes.
Now there's a lady, Langvain or something like that up in Canada, that wrote a book on the Merle gene, and you can read that and you can dive into a lot of stuff right there. But you don't have to know it to the nth degree to be able to understand how to breed these dogs effectively for color,
Okay.
But anyway, that's a little bit about the Merle coloring on these dogs.
That's pretty cool there, because there's a lot of stuff in there that I know your average person is not going to know. There's a lot of it that a lot of them aren't going to understand. There's several things in there that I didn't know, and I'm trying to learn as we go along on this. And I really, really really have enjoyed this. There's no doubt. I find that most people that are serious about these dogs, they want to learn. And so maybe, when you say things a certain way, maybe we don't understand it, but it gives us the gumption to get up off our butt and go research this stuff. And let's look at
research.
Yeah. That gives us a little more drive to delve into it, to say, hey man, I kind of think I know what he's talking about, but let me check. Yeah. I think it's really, really going to work for some people.
Another thing that I kind of, I've even written articles. I write articles, sometimes for Tuskers. Most of them are hunting stories, but I write for Full Cry and other magazines and stuff like that. I've even wrote for Mules and More magazine and some of the co-op magazines out here. But I wrote one article, and it's talking about the Catahoula breed being in trouble. And one of the things that is happening with the Catahoula breed is we're focusing the public out here, because they want a pretty dog. They're focusing on the blue leopard dogs. And in doing so, and that's why I told you in the last podcast, I try to keep, and it's because I can, because I've got enough of them that I can do that and still keep a quality dog. Yes. That I try to keep some of every color. Because I think it's important that we keep those colors alive, because if we're only picking blue leopard dogs, and we've got brindle dogs and saddleback dogs and double loop dogs and piebald dogs and all these different color patterns out here that are excellent working dogs, but we're not picking them and we're not breeding them, then we're losing a huge chunk of the Catahoula breed.
Yes.
And not all of your blue leopard dogs, just because they're pretty, are going to be working dogs. But that seems to be the engine that drives the puppy mills of these Catahoula dogs,
Yes.
And I don't mean to beat people up. I understand people got to make a living, but there's a lot of people out there that simply choose to breed Catahoula dogs because they can do it from home and it's tax free. They can dodge the government on it, and they make a little money selling pretty blue leopard Catahoula dogs.
Yep.
And so, and it sounds as hokey as the day is long, but that's one reason that I breed as many puppies as I do, is to try to stave off the wave of all the junk that keeps getting thrown into the gene pool, and I try to place my dogs, and you can believe this or not, but I can prove it to your brother. I can put my dogs on some of them big puppy mill sites, and I can get $2,500 a piece for them for puppies. All right, and I hate to confess, but I have done that.
Oh yeah, I mean,
but what I got to thinking was this, because it's not all about the money for me. If I sell a puppy to a pet home out there, there's no regeneration of that. I don't get comeback buyers and people that are coming back and buying new puppies. It's always, and now we've got, the population of the United States is huge, and I could do that till God comes home and sell pet puppies all day long. Now, mind you, they'll eat your house down, and they'll do some terrible. Matter of fact, I got a guy the other day that told me one of my dogs, one of the pups, cost him over $14,000. Because he didn't give the dog a job, and it chewed up his wife's Tahoe and eat all the wires out of it. Got out the house, chewed through 4-inch PVC pipe. Had the dogs eating his house down, eating his cars down. And he said he added up the cost, and he said, I had to get rid of that thing. He said, man, that thing was cost me over $14,000. Well, it's because the dog didn't have a job.
That's right.
If you don't give them a job, they're going to find one. The one they find is typically the wrong one.
Without a doubt.
But I can sell my pups to hunters. Now this is and and you know this, Joey, but hunters a lot of times are cheap.
Oh yeah.
And they don't. And farmers and ranchers are cheap because they're in there for profit. They're trying to make money, and they don't want to spend any more than they have to. But I sell my puppies for $750 a piece. But what happens with that is, man, that dog works, and they tell somebody else, and somebody else calls, and then I'm selling them to working homes, and they're out there doing the job they're supposed to do. And I would rather sell one for $750 that goes to a working home than sell one for $2,500 to some family out there that's never going to use the dog. You don't hear no more of it. That's me losing my bloodline, losing my breeding to the abyss. And so
it can happen too. I was like that for a long time with my Yog Terriers. I'd have people call me constantly. You know, they wanted a pup, and I'm like, okay, well, what do you plan to do with it? And they're like, well, I want to get a pair of them for breeding. No, we ain't gonna even start that. So that's out of the way. Then the next one would be like, well, I want it for a pet. I'm like, these dogs have to have a job. And I realized then, I was like, this breed is going to be in trouble real quick. And it is, and it has been, and there's a huge decline in the quality of the little terriers that I loved for so many years, and I still love them. But it can happen with any breed. Like you said, I know you've been around this long enough. You've already seen it. And there's a lot of people that think that, well, it's kind of like the embark deal. They got one thing to go off of, and so that's what they base everything off of. So they think that, well, this is the way the Catahoula is supposed to be and the way it's always been. They don't know the history of it. They don't know. They don't know what's gone, and they don't know what a real deal 100% Catahoula dog can do and is capable of. All they know is they got a pretty pup.
Sure. And there will always be a need for pet dogs. There always will be, and I've had people, I've had farmers, that have said, my God, I never would give that much for a dog in my life. I don't know, and I said, but look here. I said, let me give you this example. I said, if you was to get one of these pups and you raised it and you used it on your farm, all right, for one thing, he's worth a couple of cowboys at least in gathering your cattle. All right. Mm-hmm. So he's saving you money there. All right. And if you got a bitch and you was to raise a few litters off of it over the course of that bitch's life, and you sold the pups for the same thing I'm selling them for, I'd challenge you to find a spring and heifer that over the course of her life, she'll make you that kind of money. Mm-hmm. And they go, oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. It just boils down to dollars and cents for them,
That's right.
And so, and I can totally understand that, but when somebody, that's what blows me away is somebody will go out and buy a lap dog, a little Yorkie or a Pomeranian or something, and give $2,500 for it and never bat an eye. And then you're going to give them a dog that actually functionally does something, and they're going to strain it in that and swallow a camel, buddy.
Oh yeah. Somebody stole our little dog. We let him out of the house in the mornings, and my little future daughter-in-law, she let him go out when she went to work, and somebody picked him up. He's a friendly little dog. He's a mutt, 100% mutt, a little Chorky. I think that's what he was, Chihuahua and a Yorkie mix.
Designer dog. Yeah,
no, yeah, exactly. So me and my wife were talking about.
We used to call him mutts. Yeah.
And now don't get me wrong, he was my buddy, and I cared for the little pup a whole lot. We had him for a couple of years, had him ever since he was a little bitty thing. And it's heartbreaking, but at the same time, it's a dog. Well, my wife, she is absolutely, all our kids have done grown up and they're moving out. And we're just now starting to do the empty nest deal, and she's having a hard time coming to terms with that. So that pup was her little buddy, and so now she, he ain't come home. It's been a couple months now. So with the reality of it is, she's wanting to find her another.
Well, now it could have been a cow. We can't say 100%.
Well, and the only reason I say that, he was outside with a pit bull, which is his running buddy. Okay.
Right.
And that's the only reason I said that, because like Blue Dog, he ain't going to get in the car with nobody. Right. And he came back in the house and was barking like crazy and kept trying to go back outside. I said, somebody stopped or something. And it might not have been, like you said, it could have been Chicken Hawk grabbed him. You don't know.
Right.
But anyway, so there's all the community has rallied around my wife. And we got all these pups we're going to let you have at a good deal. At a good deal. And I told her, I said, if you want to get another Yorkie, that's what she originally wanted. I said, we will find a reputable breeder. I said, I will do some research on it. I said, and we'll spend the money that it takes to get that.
Sure. And like I said, there's a need for that stuff.
Yeah. And so I was like, this makes her happy. She does not complain about me or my dogs. Well, somebody Sent her a picture, and it looks a lot like our little dog. And now she is in there. She's in there crying about it. I'm like, baby, I'm not giving $1,000. And the man and the woman, this is how ignorant these people are to me. And I know I'm catching flack about it, but this is stupid. They said, well, it's a Chorky. I was like, okay, so it's a mutt. I'm telling my wife, she's like, it's not a mutt. I said, it's a mutt. It's a mixed breed. I said, well, how long have they been breeding these dogs? She said, well, they've never done this breeding before. So I said, well, let's see what the deal is. Oh, it was an accident. So now you're going to charge me $1,000 because you're two house
your
dogs.
Mistake, right?
Because I said, you have lost your mind.
Right.
And I told her, I said, I will never. Then they texted her back and said, we'll take $600. I said, no, you'll have to take it. I said, literally, you would have to beat me in the head with something. I said, this goes against everything I do. I said, you people are crazy. And then there was people, they was just, flogging her with all these pictures of dogs. And one woman, she was like, well, I got this little pup. And I'm not going to call no names because like they breed these dogs, right? She said, well, I got one. I'll let you have him for free. Yeah. I said, oh Lord, what's the deal? Well, it's a black dog that's 3 times bigger than any other pup that they have.
Right.
Wonder what happened.
Yeah.
It does. It's bigger than what we normally sell. I was like, no, something got in the wood pile there, buddy. I guess they think we don't know that bitch could take by 2 or 3 different dogs.
Yes, sir. In the AKC on rare breeds, they actually take several stud dogs and breed to the same bitch, and then they'll genetically test them and register them back to the male that the dog's out of.
Yeah.
See, because that bitch can have dogs out of several. It's according to how she covers on her eggs.
Yeah, I thought it was 5 or 7 or something like that I've heard. I don't know 100%. This is just hearsay. I've heard that it was either 5 or 7 males. I was like, and I know that it does happen. I know it works.
Oh yeah. Well, back in the days of stray dogs, you could tell it happened.
Yes, sir. That's what's
good. That would show right quick that it could happen.
We
had to say one more.
No, I was just gonna say my mom had a black lab, and the neighbor had a red bone, and then the neighbor down the opposite direction had a Chinese Shar-Pei.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And we had some black lab red bone crosses and black lab Shar-Pei crosses. And if you don't think you couldn't tell the difference in them 2 dogs plain as day, you looked at them like, this looks like a hound dog. I mean, you couldn't have had a prettier black red bone in your life. And then you had a Shar-Pei that was black as coal, big old wrinkles, snub face. Right. I was like, this is insane. And I'm talking about, it's just weird that, people don't think that's for real.
Oh yeah, it can happen on the regular for sure. One of the things I was going to speak to on the genetics on those Catahoula dogs again, it just come to me here about this. I was talking about the double Merle dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you breed a double Merle to an AA recessive solid, if you look on that Punnett square, 100% of the puppies will be single Merle. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but the deal, what scientists these geneticists have discovered, much like how I was telling you on the Tweed dogs, the African wild dog has the same genes, just in a different locus, different location on the genome strand. The same thing is with these, what we call a Catahoula dog today, is this. Now, I don't care if you've got a Great Dane or an Australian Shepherd or a Merle weenie dog, dash hound, okay? When they send off to get those dogs genetically tested, they know exactly where on the locus of the genome strand to find that Merle gene, okay? Because it's in the same place for all of them. It is for all dogs except for the Catahoula dog. The Merle gene on the Catahoula dog is kind of like the wild dog. It's in a different locus. It's in a different location. All right. Now, the reason I mention that is this. If say you're an Australian Shepherd breed, all right, and you get a double Merle Australian Shepherd, any Australian Shepherd breeder worth his salt knows very well not to breed a double merle Aussie to a double merle Aussie, because what you'll get is 100% snowball white puppies, deaf and blind. Okay. All right. So they don't do that. That is a major no-no. You don't do that. All right. But in the Catahoula breed, now I will say in my bloodline, I've got some double merles and quite a few of them that hear and see perfectly. And we hadn't had a deaf dog in so long, I can't remember the last one, I don't believe. Now, I'm not telling you, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we never get a deaf puppy, because that would be a lie. We will somewhere down the line get some more. It's going to happen. All right. But if you breed, what scientists have discovered, if you breed a double merle Catahoula to a double merle Catahoula, although you may get some deaf puppies and maybe some eye. Now, they way oversell the eye problem. I've in years and years of me breeding them, 50 years or so or more, myself, I've only had a couple that had, bad malformed eyes or something like that. We just knocked them in the head, never went that way again, never bred them dogs again. All right. But now, if you breed a double merle Catahoula to a double merle Catahoula, it does not statistically increase the probability of deafness and blindness, unlike it would in any other dog breed. Because the scientists think the only reason they can conceive that that's the case is not that you won't get some, but it won't statistically increase. Like if you bred a pair of Aussies double merle, 100% of them are going to be deaf and blind. The only reason they think that can be is because the locus is the gene is on a different locus on the genome strand in a Catahoula dog than it is any other.
Oh, okay.
And so, anyway, that's kind of a neat little point, but thought I'd drop that out there. But
no, that is a good point.
Now, I am going to preface that with I've read that. I'm not the geneticist that done it. So if that turns out not to be true, I'm like a lot of people. I'm reading something, calling it fact, but that's
there you go.
That was kind of curious anyway.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing about it. Like, there's so much information that you've put out in these past couple of episodes. I mean, the good, the conversation, the great stories, all that is wonderful, but the information that comes from this type stuff here, it's really is going to reach a lot of people. And there's a lot of people right now that have been wondering about some of these things, and they're going to get some validation from it right here.
Well, I've got 3, maybe 4 books that are fixing to be published pretty quick. I've got a couple of them are just going to be good hunting stories. It'll be like reading Old Yeller or Where the Red Fern Grows or something like that.
That's good.
But they're actual real stories. And then I'm going to write a book that has a lot to do with the history and the makeup of these dogs. It'll go into some of the genetic stuff and that kind of stuff. And then you may have heard from Ed Barnes and Chris Powell from Houndsman XP that I'm an old crusty old cowboy, but I do write a little poetry. and I may put a book of poetry out there too. And a lot of the poetry has to do with the dogs. And
that's awesome. There's a lot of people that would never think that about the poetry side of things, but I think that happens more than not with a lot of houndsmen and dog people. I write myself. I've got a book. I never share them with anybody. It's kind of my private deal. But
oh yeah.
And I've written songs. I know people that do very similar things. That Mr. Floyd Boudreaux, one of the all-time, bulldoggers.
Right.
He wrote all kind of poems.
Cool.
About the bulldogs. I think that's just our love of the dogs.
Well, hey, if you don't mind, I've got a little short one I'll read you. Now,
throw it down.
The one I read on the Houndsman XP was a little longer. It was lengthy.
You do whatever you want. We can cut this thing into 2 or 3 episodes. I know the guy who runs this deal.
Oh, okay. Well, that's I call this one No Wire. Okay. In the home state of Texas, where the best cow dogs are bred, the old cowboy woke to a spotted cur pup nestled by his bed. Out on the range, a prairie moon was fading. The years in the saddle had his back aching. The line shack had been lonely with the other brush poppers gone. The cowpoke whistled, and the pup came along. He was a good dog right from the start. It didn't take him long to show he had heart. Barking at prairie dogs grew into baying bear. Gathering strays, he earned his share. Every maverick was sure to be found, putting the rankest of cattle to their bed ground. Nary drover's collie could make the mark. This leopard dog could bunch cattle with a single bark. Many a rancher tried to buy this model cur, never at the cowboy's heel and spur. Gray had begun to paint old Pard's muzzle as he laid his head on the cowboy's chaps to nuzzle. In the buckaroo's face where many weathered lines were drawn, the days of no wire had all but gone. A wolf howls as nighttime falls, where the cowboy and his dog duty calls. There you go.
Man. Hey, I like it. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that for real. I love to read, and that's one thing I've told Ed Barnes. I don't know how many times, talk about the magazines and stuff like that. There's not many of them left. I mean, when I was a kid, getting that Field and Stream magazine or Outdoor Life, man, it was just, and I worked my butt off to get. I think back then it was like $3.95 a year, $10 a year for a copy every month, and then it kept getting more and more. But that was my highlight. I'd get that magazine, and that's how we learned everything. We didn't have all this at the end of our fingertips on the phone.
Oh, I had, the hunter's horn back in the day and fur fishing game.
Oh yeah. I still
Outdoor Life, all those,
That's right. Full Cry, all these magazines. We need to keep them things alive.
Right, and I tell you, Full Cry, we like to lost it, and then somebody bought it.
Yes, sir.
And kind of keeping it alive, and people need to support that.
Yes, sir.
I wrote a few articles on them, but it's for me. I don't know these old hog hunting stories, treeing bear and mountain lion. That's just a little more exciting than treeing a coon.
I know what you mean.
But anyway, well, brother, I have sure enjoyed talking with you.
Lord, yes.
And you've got the guy on the phone here that can get on a soapbox about any kind of hunt for that matter. But buddy, when you mention the Catahoulas dog, I've generally got something to say.
There you go. And that's and we really, like I said, I really, really appreciate it. I know all our listeners do. Like I said, I've had a good response. We only had that episode out just a day or two, and I've had calls and messages. They're like, man, we love this. And I was like, well, I'm recording with him again tonight. If we get to maybe on in the future, get some more hunting stories together or something like that. If you want to talk again, so we're always open for that.
Well, you just let me know, because like I said, I don't want to just overtake your podcast. I know you've got different directions you can go and talk to people, and the different types of working dogs out there, and
yes, sir.
And the different styles of hunting, and like I told you just the other day, I've always particularly done things a certain way. But when I hunt with other people, I really enjoy the way they hunt too. We just shift gears and do it their way.
That's right. And that and that's I think we're going to be coming down there close to some of your old stomping grounds down there below Sheridan and Leola.
Oh my goodness, really?
Yeah, I think we're going to go down there and hunt here. I got to get the dates back together. We went first part of the year and had an absolute good time. Down there in the pine thickets, boy, we run hogs.
Yeah.
So I'm
who you gonna go with down there?
Braxton Sultan. Yeah, younger guy. Braxton's, I think he's 21, 22 years old. But and I've said it before on this when we went down there. When we got there, the properties were lined up. We had a place to stay. The food was good. I mean, the hunt was planned out. It was like going hunting with somebody like you or me, somebody who's been doing it a long time. There was never, well, what are we going to do today, boys? You know, it's like, no, this is how it's going to go. And we went. The hogs were there. We run the hogs. We caught hogs. There were some we didn't catch, but overall, and Brad, you know, we're going to go back again. I'm gonna I'll holler at you when we come out that way, and I've got 2 or 3 spots out there in Arkansas that we might get together and go turn the dog loose.
Yeah, holler at me sometime. If I can get down there, I will. I'm
Yes, sir.
of course forward to help. You know, Ed has invited me over there, and I told him I'm coming, and he's probably about to think I'm not, but it's in the plans.
There you go.
I'll make sure, you know. I missed Uncle Earl's this year. I just had so much going on, I couldn't get down there. There wasn't no way, and but Larry went and represented for us. So
yeah.
But anyway,
well,
that's you know, there ain't much of that old country down there that I don't know.
That's right.
All over most of the state of Arkansas. And,
you know Chad Fryer?
Oh yeah.
All right, well, Chad hunted with us down there too.
Okay.
So he cowboys, and he's got some pretty good hounds.
Right. Well, I like it, brother, and
all right.
I may just show up and bring me and watch your dogs go. Just see how you boys do it. I might bring a dog, I might not. But if I'm sure we'll have a good time either way.
Well, that's going to be guaranteed. We're going to have a good time regardless. Y'all can out hunt us, but you can't out fun us.
So, well, there you go. Hey,
all right.
I went hunting over at the refuge one time. We were coon hunting over there, and there's a bunch of these hillbillies up here went with me.
Yes.
Now this is how bad it can be here in Ozark. Some of them old boys. Now I was hunting with them out of the Table Rock Sports Association over here, and they were, middle-aged men. Some of them north of that a little bit, and they had never been south of Little Rock. Okay, and I told them, now, boy, look, I said, we get down on that refuge. I said, coons is thick. I said, we love a tree 3 or 4 coons in the tree. And they said, oh, Plummer, you ain't got to tell us that. We're already headed that way. We're going. You don't have to build it up. Well, the first tree we treed, I think, big old cypress out on the edge of one of them lakes down there, had 4 coons up the tree. And they said, my goodness, you wasn't kidding, was you? Look at that. And I told them, I said, now the trees up here are not as tall as they are down there. I said, you'll have to throw your headlights straight back so you top them trees down there. And of course, they just couldn't hardly believe it. Well, these dudes walk around the Ozarks up here in these Ozark Mountains. They got one leg shorter than the other, walking around these hills.
Yeah.
And they get down there in that flatland, and buddy, they're lost as a goose in a whirlwind. They don't, they said everything looks the same. How do you guys get around down here? And we went into an old tree one night, and there was a fella. He's dead. He died this last year, old Junior Laster. And Junior Laster has won the bench show at Automotive more than any man ever has. And I don't believe there's a man that can bench show a Walker Hound any better than Junior Laster. But he was, and God bless him, everybody knows that he was windy as a bag of farts. And so we get down there, and Rex Davis and Terry Davis, they grew up on Darasol down there, Darasol Creek. And Terry's fun-loving, good guy. And I love Rex to pieces too, but he drives a cracker now. He's serious. And so there was 5 or 6 of us lined up there on them wheelers going down them bottom, and we was taking turns kicking our dogs out. And they got to collaring their dogs like this competition hunting, and old Junior, every time that old buck dog hissed out, he'd say, strike old buck, 3 old buck. Well, old Rex Davis was up the front and of that line of wheelers, and he gets off and he goes past every fella, and I'm in the back. And he walks back to me, and of course, he knew Junior come down there with me. And he says, Plummer, he said, that fella's calling my dog. I said, well, Rex, tell him. He whirls around, walks up there to Junior, throws his finger in his face, and he said, fella, you've been calling my dog all night. And old Junior says, no, that's Buck's off bark. That's this, that's that. He said, no, sir. He said, that's my bitch out there treed right now. And he said, and I'll tell you when old Buck barks.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's a good name.
Oh, we did have a good time. But
Yes, sir.
anyway,
All right,
that's
brother.
the biggest part of it. But hey, I'll let you close this thing up because I know it's getting late again. But,
All right, Mr. Plummer. Like I said, we really appreciate you, and God bless you. And if there's anything that we can do anytime, you just give us a holler.
Yes, sir. I will. I appreciate you, boys. We'll make it around sometime.
All right. You have a good night.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Y'all asked for it. There you go. Part 2. There's a lot of knowledge there. Some great stories. That's the kind of stuff that we need in the dog hunting world right there, people. That's what we need. It's what we got to have. We got to have it. We got to pass these things on. There's not a lot of great storytellers anymore. I mean, these hunts and stuff like that, they're the truth, but it's the way that you present it and the way that you talk about it and the way that you tell it. There's very few storytellers anymore that can grasp your attention and hold it. And then you have somebody that's as knowledgeable as that, down to the basis on the scientific part of it, on these, way to breed dogs for color or for bobtail or for certain characteristics. Man, that's a lot. Mr. Plummer is a world of knowledge, and man, I'm glad we had him on here. I'm going to be talking with him some more. I might have a thing or two I'm going to work up and see what he thinks about it. And y'all just keep on keeping up with us. We appreciate y'all listening. Thank y'all for everything that you've done to help us keep this alive and to keep it growing. We're still growing a little bit, a little at a time. We're just staying steady. And that's slow and steady wins the race. And that's what we're trying to do. We're just going to keep on going. Like my buddy Ryan Rankin says from Boars N Broads, he's always he's like to the moon. That's where we're going with it. Thanks to all of y'all. So until the next time, we'll see y'all. Y'all stay good and God bless you. And we're out.
Hope you enjoyed that episode. If there's anything or anyone you'd like to hear on the podcast, or if you'd like to come hunt with us, don't hesitaate to contact us at dixiedoggers01@gmail.com.